Welcome to Pickwick Monthly. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And my first two Pickwickian co-hosts for today are Courtney Krolczyk and Kevin Quinn. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello, Ed.
Thank you for come. My hat's across the room here, and it's probably very dusty. I don't think I'm going to put it on right now. Maybe I will later. One of my hat. I do have a black one too. Uh, James Armstrong and Jake Romano will join us in the second half of the show. So I thought that might be the easier way for us to get through these final chapters. It's not if we were all on talking about everything. So we'll split up. You guys are on now, and then you'll stay on for the rest of the show. And we'll have Jake and James join us later. And so for 20 months, we've been talking about Charles Dickens's The Posthumous Papers of the Pickwick Club as it was first serialized in monthly parts from March 1836 to October 1837. Once a month, myself and one of a rotating set of co-hosts have talked about each serialized part, and here we are for the final episode on the double serial issue numbers 19 and 20. Along the way, we have seen some items in the Rosenbach's collections, complete serial issues of the Pickwick Papers. We have portions of the Pickwick manuscript we shared for a couple episodes, letters from Dickens, playbills from 19th century Pickwick plays, Dickens drink recipes. And one of them, which I'm pretty sure is completely unknown, his moonbeams for summer drinking, and even a lock of Dickens's hair, which we shared last month. In today's episode, numbers 19 to 20, chapters 53 to 57, or 52 to 56, if it's just in the the old PDF or the very first edition of it, we will wrap up the story with marriages, inheritances, and retirement. All the characters come on stage for the last time to take their bows, but we'll also take some time to talk about kind of the aftermath of this. There's, some other Pickwickian things that happen in the after this, like the characters in Master Humphrey's Clock make an appearance and other things. And we'll also take some time to talk about this experience of reading a story one part at a time over so many months, which has been quite extraordinary, hasn't it, Kevin, Courtney? I mean, just reading this over such a period of time, and I really held to it. I did not, at the very end, I read both parts last month. Like I had to, because I had to start prepping for everything to finish the show. But no, I stuck with it the whole time. I didn't reread each part's month until that month. And I was just as forgetful as I am normally in life too, and having to keep going back and look at past issues to remember. But if you're watching live right now, thank you. Please like these videos, subscribe to this channel, have fun in the live chat. If you are watching the recording, I also ask you to like these episodes and subscribe to the channel. You can leave comments or questions in the comment section of YouTube, and I'll get back to them. And we have a few people watching us from Richmond, Virginia, Roanoke, Virginia. It's like the Virginia contingent today. And Jim Murphy from Center City. Hey, guys, glad to have you aboard for the final issue. It's a double issue. We got a lot to get to today, guys. First, just tell me your quick impressions of what this has been like over 20 months reading one story. I mean, you both know the story, but to experience it over this time, what's this been like for you?
You go first, Courtney.
Well, first, I mean, I can't believe it's been 20 months. Indeed, it certainly doesn't feel like that. What was this? Let's see. The reading experience, I mean, again, I feel like it would be different with other serial novels. I think the kind of more sporadic, picaresque nature of the Pickwick Papers kind of makes this type of pick up and go reading more accessible. I wonder what it would be, for different novels, because of course, I think it's Dickens' career goes on, the novels become, I guess, definitely still have a Picaresque quality, but perhaps more narratively centralized in this one. And this is also something, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, in the preface, that he's like conscious of. And he says something like, I know this, he actually says that he wanted each number to feel more or less complete for people picking it up. And this, though, would end up being, and this was kind of just happened as result of happenstance, the way this, with him writing to what was originally supposed to be the Seymour illustrations, how the situation of this publication happened, but then would shape his novel writing career for the rest of his life. Even in novels that are supposed to kind of have a more centralized narrative as well. So I think it was a little bit easier with this one, but yeah, definitely, like, there were many times, even just for reading it last month, I pick up and say, okay, what? I have no memory of what happened at the end of the last one, and have to kind of go back and look at that. And often it doesn't like take exactly, like, going back to the last page of the last issue doesn't actually really help you either, so there's kind of he takes up because within each section, though, he says he wants them to be a complete whole, but they actually, within each section, they jump around quite a bit, right? We have, one about Arabella and Winkle, and then one about Weller dunking Mr. Stiggins' head in the thing, and then the next issue begins not with anything about the Wellers and them finding the will, which is what the last month ended on, but back to Pickwick and Arabella speaking from the beginning of the last one. So even though he says that each are kind of complete, we get kind of a good deal of jumping around within each issue. So that's just, I guess, kind of one thing that I've noticed from my serial reading experience here.
Let me remind anybody watching the show, if you have any questions for us too, happy to answer them today. I'm actually really going to keep a close eye on the chat if you have questions that we can answer today for the last episode. Jim Murphy said he just finished the last pages 15 minutes ago. Way to go, Jim, for finishing on time, being prepared for class. Kevin, how many times have you read this? Is this one you've read a bunch?
So, honestly, I wish I kept a reading log like you had, and then I could
I do have a reading log,
but I did read it in college. I know that. I did read it, I think, at least once after that, and before I really got into high Dickens gear when I got involved with the fellowship, which is now about almost 20 years ago. But so I'm gonna venture to say 5 times. And it was when I went to my first Dickens Fellowship meeting being conducted by Mike Quinn, who was eulogized as Pickwick in the flesh. I mean, many prominent Dickensians spoke about Mike, from Michael Slater on and so on. He had been so involved for so many years, that my memories of Pickwick Papers now are always going to involve Mike Quinn at that first meeting asking me to read Jingle, the part when they come out of the courtyard, head of the family off, sandwich in hand, no mouth to put it in. Shocking. So like it's, at 62 years old, it's indelibly a part of my life and Dickens, and which kind of goes back to your question. Like, it's hard for me. First of all, I was not as disciplined. Full disclosure, honest here. Didn't stick to all. Did a couple, maybe 1 or 2 months. There might have been 3 where I had to double up and catch up, in between when I wasn't moderating.
Yeah.
So I did stray from the Dickensian path.
You guys were on every few months, so yes.
Yeah. So again, I think
I would double up. So like, that's not, the way the first readers experienced it. And of course you can't.
Although some of them would have. Some of them would have clearly been catching up from months.
And also think of reading this. This is obviously not going to be the only thing you're reading, especially as this type of publishing becomes, might be reading, the miscellany or whatever that comes out every month as well. As this type of publishing becomes real popular, you're going to be reading maybe a bunch of novels simultaneously, potentially, like this as well. So.
Well, you're both very good and thank you for letting me off the hook there. My romantic notion is sort of everybody waiting and, for the next monthly, and they grab it and they devour it. And of course, a lot of that went on too, I guess, but it was read so widely and in so many different ways that I suppose the experience was different. But we're so sad. My mind as a 20th century, now 21st century reader, is sort of, wired to get to the plot
Yeah.
points and kind of get there. I want to know what the characters do and what's the plot and how does he work the theme and what's the style. So like it's hard for me to slow down in
Yeah.
a book like this. Now we did do Bleak House in the following the monthly parts.
Yeah.
In the group, and it was a similar experience, but since we took the summer off, it ran almost 2 years, so it was really tough, to do. So I admire what you did here, and what it did for me. The gift you gave me was, in these troubled times with the slum keys of the world out there who's shouting the loudest, it brought this into my life. As a co-host, as an experiencer of the other wonderful hosts, which is, everybody brought their flavor to it. And, it was a great gift to me over this period of 20 months. I had to, have more Pickwick in my life. I mean, that's never a bad thing.
Never a bad thing. Yeah. Joyce in the chat said she had to finish the whole novel after a few months. And that's, I mean, that's like you were saying, that's what we like.
I totally get that,
trained to
Joyce.
read
It's
that.
hard.
Like, this is the way we do this now. But it's
right.
it's actually
We binge.
exactly like comic books work now. If there are any comic book readers out there, you wait month to month to finish your story, and that's the same thing goes on. But for most people, it's more akin to following serial television. But then that's even weekly. You don't have to wait a whole month. And of course, there's plenty of times where you miss a week, miss a couple weeks. You have to catch up. So those kind of things happen too whenever you do serial fiction.
And just one other point, like back to what you were saying, Courtney, like trying to make his intention being each episode sort of in a self-contained universe. So it does have sort of those elements of watching, say, One Adam 12 on TV, and every weekly episode on TV you get a nice wrap up, but that's at odds with the longer narrative threads, which I think we're there, and I know he gets kind of knocked for not having. He even in the 1968. One of the interesting things is Dickens' own opinion. Since it was his first work, we get to hear his words on his early work, like this preface to the 1968 edition.
I think you mean the 1868.
1868. I'm sorry. Yes.
He's not that old.
So that's that'd be a trick. So that's interesting too. Where he kind of ends his commentary on the social aspects of it. And a lot of people, maybe you don't think of this as one of his social commentary novels, but so much of that is in there too. And the whole contrast between light and dark. I was riding my bicycle today, looking at the light and the dark, the interplay and the beautiful leaves out there today, and thinking about that and how, those interpolated tales, kind of serve to be some of those dark shadows, and he didn't have to go full gothic with his characters and could keep the other side of it very light, so perhaps heightening the contrast.
Mm-hmm.
God, I wish I had Changing Leaves here. We don't. We had 2 days that weren't in the 90s for the first time I've been back, which was real nice. But it's getting hot again now, so
it's really lovely. The Mets are still in the baseball. I wish it was still Red October down there for those Philly guys too. I mean, I wish the Mets and the Phillies could just play for the whole month. That would be my idea.
Yeah. Well, we're not even going to get down that road.
Yeah. My team. Yeah, you don't want to hear about my team too. The Astros. A lot of people aren't big.
But of course that's in Pickwick too, right? You want to play cricket, Jingle's there too, so it contains multitudes.
All right, let's jump into this issue. This double issue. Now the copies we have been the PDFs I've been sharing every month are from the University of Victoria Library, because the Pickwick and parts that we have at the Rosenbach is not yet digitized, and it would have been too big of a project for me to try to digitize it as well as do the show. So they have one online. We've been sharing that all along. That's where all these copies come from. Thank you so much to the University of Victoria Library. When I asked them in the beginning, do you mind? And they were like, oh, mine, please. This is what they want, they do this for, so these things can get out there in the world. And here, your Dickens mug. But I did find out from Courtney, and I missed it. There were a couple pages missing in the middle of this last issue.
Yeah, I think it was 580, 584 and 585 were missing. So it's like the last page of one chapter and then the beginning of the next.
You have to jump to an edition.
Mhm.
To
yeah, I just went on Project Gutenberg and read a few hundred words that were missing. So.
Well, also missing in this final issue is the very beginning. There are advertisements in the back of the one that we shared, but in the very beginning doesn't have the Pickwick advertiser in the start. And it is, I think, 26 pages of Pickwick advertisements for other things in this. My facsimile edition that I always use, and I read one of these a month. It was just fun to just do it. I read it in the same format. This is Easton Press had published these. I forget how many years ago, a couple decades ago or something, maybe in the 1990s. And it's perfect. Well, it's as perfect as they could make it. I mean, every issue is the first printing of, a facsimile of the first printing of it. So especially for the early issues, that really matters. You get the bus illustrations that aren't included later. They're dropped and Fizz redoes them. But all the advertisers are in here, and they just grow and grow and grow. And in this one, it's just lots of books and all the things that we've been seeing and some of the others. Here's the Royal Hunt, preparing for publication, the meeting of Her Majesty's Staghounds on Ascot Heath. It's an engraving. It's this giant paragraph that's just that's describing an engraving that you can buy of this Staghounds on Ascot Heath. And then, of course, you get, Roland's Macassar oil and Calidor that are ubiquitous in 19th century advertisements. And
I have a very funny one that I wanted to mention that was actually at the end of the advertisements.
We'll do that because we'll hit that when we go to the end, because we're going to go through this right now. And let me share the copy that they had out.
And we do have the advertisement on the back of the blue cover, and it is, I also wanted to shout out too that we also get Seymour's popular sketches, and it does eulogize him a bit. This is on if you weren't reading along with this edition, on that back page of the cover, to say anything in the way of critique of these popular sketches would only be a waste of words, as seeing is the only means of conveying their real merit and character to the mind. But to form some small ideal of them is to consider the truth displayed in the drawing of the delightful Mr. Pickwick and the other characters of the Pickwick Club, they being originally designed by this prince of humorists who is now no more, and we may never see the like again. One may make great merit, and one great merit of these sketches is they may be placed with confidence on the drawing room table, being in small unique poems, adapted to the amusement of all parties. So we do get a interesting little eulogy for our first illustrator here.
When it says they are to be had at most libraries, it doesn't mean what we think of now as public libraries. It means, circulating libraries that you would belong to and then get to borrow books for a fee, because you can't afford to buy all the books, and it's a much smaller, amount that you would have to pay, and you would be able to take books out of these circulating libraries. And yeah, Seymour was really the originator of the Pickwick posthumous papers of the Pickwick Club. He wanted to draw four funny pictures every month, and Dickens would just give him some text for these funny pictures. Well, Dickens took over. Seymour committed suicide. I don't really think that that's related, but and then Dickens continued on.
Yeah, and if I remember back to when we talked about this, like, 2019 or whatever months ago, when we were speaking about it, if you look at kind of some of Seymour's earlier work, you can kind of see little proto Pickwicks that he was already drawing in some of these sketches, little fat men in glasses, trying to hunt awkwardly on Hampstead Heath or whatever.
So just a question, Ed, like, are there any illustrations at this point in the adverts? It doesn't seem like there's a lot of illustrations, whereas my 1853 Bleak House has a lot of illustrations in the adverts that are works of art in their own, and they also have even like little inserts. Like there's a fabric advert, and it has a little swatch of fabric in there that you can touch, you know?
Well, this one
Anything
has a
like that
catalog.
yet at this
It
point?
has a
This one has a little
catalog in the back
catalog
for
at the end
silverware.
that I'll show.
Okay.
Well, and the which is in this too, which is in this PDF that we're sharing. But no, just little pictures here and there, you know.
Like it'll be like of an eye or something. Like
Yeah, real
towards
little
the end.
illustrations.
Okay.
Nothing. There was one actually.
At the end of last month's number 18, there was a pretty detailed, like looked like almost like a vignette frontispiece for the history of the French Revolution by M.A. Peters. There was a pretty detailed one, like a full page illustration. But other than that, you're kind of mainly getting like, picture of silverware or something that takes up the top quarter of the page.
It doesn't seem to happen too much in the Pickwicks, but in other serial publications, you do get, sometimes, very large, like prints that, and I'm sure people would say, and it was an example, like, look, and you can get even more like this and better.
Right.
It does happen in some of these serial publications. This one after the usual, which is actually doubled in this. I don't know if it's doubled in they mistakenly scanned it twice, but this one is in here twice, or if they're copying.
Yeah, I think it might. Let me see. Actually, I think it is doubled. I was assuming it was mistakenly scanned because we're missing 2 pages, but if you look, the stains are different on each one. So I think it was actually
it's different.
The person reading it would have gotten two of these illustrations.
It was bound in mistakenly. And then you get this picture, which is I think called a vignette.
Which could mean, I don't know, maybe pages 54 and 55 were missing in the one they scanned too. It could have been that as well. I mean, it could have been missing from the actual thing that somebody bought in the 1830s.
We get this vignette here with this illustration of Mr. Pickwick and Sam under this kind of arched canopy here.
I'd say this is actually related. This is kind of, it looks very Gothic, but it does have a trendy element. It's kind of related to some, you'll see a lot of these kind of Gothic architectural features in German illustration at this time, which many English illustrators are starting to bring over. You'll see this most prominently in kind of Daniel McLeese's book illustrations, particularly I think he did illustrations for a couple of the non-Christmas Carol Christmas books, like The Chimes or The Cricket on the Hearth. So you'll see these kind of like architectural features. This is a little bit more on the whimsical side, but this is actually interestingly kind of I'd say this kind of this arch motif here is an influence of a kind of German illustration styles coming in.
And these goblin figures all around here make me think of the Goblin Story. But what I'm wondering is this portrait back here?
That is so strange. Yes, and I have to assume this is Mr. Pickwick in his new house that we hear about at the end, because it makes mentions of kind of a study. Instead of being on the road, he's comfortably ensconced with a little kitty cat there. There's a cat on the ground. Glad to hear that he's a feline lover. But yes,
this portrait is bespectacled. I mean, could this possibly be Mr. Pickwick back here?
No, it's a woman.
Can I jump in, guys?
Look at the clothing. It's a woman.
Yeah,
it has we see a cinched waist and kind of a little collar kind of here. It's 100% a woman, whoever it's supposed to be.
What do you have to show there,
can I jump in? So my Johansson illustrations of Fizz of the novels, where he has all the different plates has a couple things to say about this one.
Good.
Um,
I'm going to
it
share
says,
while you talk.
the sign over there's plate A and plate B. The sign over the doorway of the inn reads Tony Veller with a V, and B, the marquee of Granby's arm in the sign.
We didn't get to that one yet. Let's about this one.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm working on this one. I got mixed around. Okay.
We're talking about
Let's see what it says by
fanciful.
the Sheep Eyes Tupman port. It mentions a Tupman portrait.
Yeah, at the
A
bottom
Tupman.
here.
Where's that one?
The
Tupman.
There's three, if you go down, there's three, I don't know if it's,
here it is. Yeah, they're right down here.
There's three vignettes of,
It's like
ultimately
Snodgrass,
Snodgrass with the
Tupman,
laurels.
and Winkle. Yeah.
So
Okay,
yes, so
so-
we don't know who the woman. It's definitely a woman. She has little glovies on. She has the outfit's definitely a woman. No idea what's happening with the hair up there, hair or cap or whatever that is.
Yeah, it doesn't say anything about her in this.
Very,
Sadly.
very strange
Nothing.
looking. And the fun and frivol. I mean, this is clearly here's a goblin here with the hat on. These you know, is this a Punchinello figure here?
Yeah, the hat. Yeah.
A little sleeping cat on the floor. And yeah, this is in later life after retirement. Sam's sometimes reading to Mr. Pickwick, they say. This is one of the things that he does is he reads aloud to Mr. Pickwick. Which is like
I was gonna say, if somebody with
funny
such
in
a
itself.
creative grasp on the English language, I
Yeah.
don't know if I'd want them
How
reading
Sam would
something.
read whatever he's reading might be an adventure in and of itself. And then we have this next one, which you were mentioning a little notes over. Here we have an illustrated title page, and note that it's the Pickwick Papers, as this has come to be known, and it's come to be known that from the very beginning. It's entitled The Posthumous Papers of the Pickwick Club, but now it's The Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens in this at least illustrated title page for it, which gives us an illustration, as you mentioned a little earlier, Courtney, of Stiggins being dunked, or Kevin mentioned Stiggins being dunked by Sam Weller, which happened at the end of last issue. And it's a perfect scene to illustrate. And why didn't we get that illustration in the last issue?
But and also an absolutely bizarre one to sum up the whole, to kind of provide any kind of summation for the novel, right?
Yeah.
For your opening vignette title page, right?
This is what this book is about. And you're right. And Kevin, up here we see it's Tony Veller with a V.
So that's plate A. The other plate says Tony Weller with a W. That's plate B.
See, Weller,
there were two plates.
Tony would have corrected it. Tony would have said no, because we get that in this chapter. And one of the chapters this month is he's like, no, it's with a we.
Right. Yeah, he would have been a plate
They would have had to
guy.
copy the plates as well, because
Yeah.
even the steel engraved plates, you could really only pull so many copies
Yeah.
from them before they start to wear down.
And that's the reason that there are different plates, and then they'd have to re-etch this onto the plate to make.
And later they have like stereotyping, where you can pretty easily like make copies in metal of it, but I'm not sure. In this case, you may have had to just re-etch it completely, just trying to make an exact copy of it.
His note here says that the B plate, the one that says with a W, was used without change in the bound volume of 1838. So I guess it still had some life to it.
There's even more in this. Let me make sure I don't have any questions coming in here. None right now. After the whoops, that's not what I'm looking for. There's my screen. The advert, yeah, and then after this we get an advertisement. Oh, we get the illustrations. There's another doubling up of illustrations here. So this one had both illustrations twice, a misbinding. Here we get the advertisement for the Pickwick Papers, as it's going to be available in one volume. It'll be available on November 14th.
Just in time for my birthday on November 15th. Perfect.
You know, and this is dated October 30, which would have been the last weekday of the month, I think in 1837, when this hit the stands. That's why I do these from March to October, because it really does come out in the last weekday of the month. And then you can buy the complete, and you could get it either neatly bound in cloth for £1 a shilling, or you could get it a little fancier for a little more, or even with gilt edges for even more. And then the subscribers desirous of having their copies bound in a similar style can have them bound, done by the publishers or through their booksellers at these prices. Meaning what you do is you take all of your serial parts and you take them to the publisher, and it only costs you 6 shillings and 6 pence to have them all bound with Morocco and gilt edges. You could have them bound for that. So
about half as much as buying the
a shilling a month,
less, about £1 less.
So you pay 18 shillings, 18, 19, 20 shillings for the whole thing, and then you'd have it bound for another 6 and 6. And that's a little over £1, right? Is it 24 shillings in a pound? Or is 12 shillings in a pound or 24? I can't remember.
12 pence in a shilling and 20 shillings in a pound.
20 shillings. So it's like £1.50 almost, for the whole deal.
Well, that's basically the same as if you were to buy it new. If you were to buy the whole bound Morocco with gilt edges.
It's £1. It's £1 and a shilling. So, they also advertise a new work by Bose, which is coming out 31st of March, 1838. This will be Nicholas Nickleby, and Dickens is now continuing what he will what he will do for many years, is that he's writing 2 works at the same time. Because he'll still be finishing Oliver. He's been doing Pickwick and Oliver Twist for the last several months at the same time. Then he'll be continuing Oliver Twist and starting a new one. Total glutton for overwork, Dickens, all the time. I can't imagine creating that much work for 2 stories every month. And then there's an advertisement for the sketches, which now they have purchased from the that the publishers Chapman and Hall have purchased the copyright for, so they can publish them themselves, and they wind up doing them as a monthly serial, which will begin as soon as Pickwick ends. They have a monthly for the sketches, and then you can buy it in in these this is in 20 numbers in octavo, price 1 shilling each, sketches by Bose. This is what it looks like. Let me share the pictures of the sketches serial. And here it is. This is what they look like. This is number 5. And look, the Bung for Beetle, vote for Spruggins, because one of the stories in there is about an election, much like we have the Eatanswill thing in the paper. But all these sketches were written before Pickwick Papers, or a few of them were written. A few of the final ones were written while he started Pickwick Papers, from the second series, and they're all just sketches. This is not a long story. If they're what you would maybe today call short stories, but they're even a little different from that. And they were published in 20 parts over the months, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So he did it in 20. Dickens does it in 19 because the final issue is a double. So, but the sketches they had to do in a separate 20. There's no double issue for it, or maybe the final issue was doubled, but I don't know. So there you go. So then you have the sketches advertisement, and then I'm going to skip to the end of this thing just because it's really connects with some of the things that they mentioned at the beginning here about having it bound together. If you jump to the end of this, you get the other parts that will make this into a book for yourself. Half title page, full title page. Look at the full title page. See, now it's by Charles Dickens. Every serial issue says edited by Bose. Now it's by Charles Dickens. The book's by Charles Dickens. He's not trying to pretend that he's not Charles Dickens, like, and only be known as Bose. But there are still readers, I think, who are going to refer to him as Bose. And you see that in plenty of reviews of the Pickwick Papers, that people refer to him as Bose and instead of Dickens. And then here it's 43 illustrations by R. Seymour and Fizz. Buss has been written out. Robert Buss has not contributed to Pickwick Club because the 2 illustrations he did, they dropped them when they started reprinting the serial issues, and Fizz replaced them with his own. So many readers never even saw the Buss. If they didn't get that limited first printing of issue number 3, they didn't get those Buss illustrations. So that's why it's great to find those in if people collect. If you find one with Buss illustrations or even a bound edition with them, that's a very rare thing. Bradbury and Evans, and then we get the dedication. The dedication is to Mr. Sergeant Talford, MP, etc., etc. And Talford was a friend of Dickens. It's Thomas Noon Talford. He's a lawyer and he's a friend. And he had given Dickens a lot of introductions to literary society at the time. And he also proposed Dickens for membership in the Athenaeum Club. I think I think that might be the first significant club that Dickens belongs to. And clubs are very important for men, for not just socializing, but for making connections and doing things. And in the 19th century, Talford also fought for copyright reform. It was one of his big issues that he was always fighting for, and Dickens loved that. I think Talford even represented Dickens when he sues people over the Christmas Carol piracy later. And note the sergeant in that's not his name, it's his title, just like Sergeant Buzzfuzz. It's the legal title that he has. He's the person that he can go and argue a case in the court. There's the sergeants that do that. But Buzzfuzz is not based on Talford. Talford does, though, inspire a later character in Dickens, in David Copperfield. He is the inspiration for Thomas Traddles. I love Traddles in Copperfield, and Talford is the inspiration for him. It's a nice little dedication, but what I find more interesting that I will share right now is a letter that Dickens wrote to Talford. This is not in the Rosenbach's collection. This is according to the Pilgrim edition of Dickens' letters, it says it's in Somerville College, Oxford. Whether or not it's still there, we don't know. It's, the Pilgrim edition of letters was put together some time ago, but it's most likely still there. And this is to T.N. Talford from Doughty Street, Sunday morning. I must ask you to excuse me today. I need not, I hope, ask you to believe that by staying away, I deny myself the greatest pleasure and enjoyment. The 2 Pickwicks for the month, he's got to write this double Pickwick for this month, are so heavy a task, and it is so important that they should be out of my hands this week that I am obliged in violation of my established usage to write this evening. I have postponed making this resolution until this morning in the hope that I might make some great start which would render it unnecessary. No such start, I am sorry to say, has taken place, so I must plod on. Always difficult for him to get all the writing done that he needs to do. As I shall sit down to work about the same time as you sit down to dinner, I shall take a glass of wine with you in imagination, and fancy I hear your sympathizing with my solitary condition, which will be a great relief and consolation, and very appropriate, moreover, you being the tutelar deity of my black-gaitered acquaintance. the black gaitered acquaintance is Mr. Pickwick, who's always wearing his, gaiters. And this, because he's dedicating the novel to him, Talford is the deity or the muse, so to speak, of it. It's a very nice little letter here. With best remembrances to Mrs. Talford and Miss Ellie. Don't forget the women in the household. And make sure you give them my regards. So that's who gets the dedication to this work. And they remain friends and associates for a long time. Talford and Dickens do. I think Talford dies and Dickens writes the obituary in one of his magazines, Household Words or something, one of the magazines that he does later. Then there's a preface. And you mentioned this earlier, Courtney, this idea of, he's writes about, the author's object in this work was to, create these constant succession of characters and incidents, to paint them in vivid colors as he could command, to render them at the same time lifelike and amusing. But like you had pointed out, Courtney, he talks about this, writing in monthly numbers and having to connect them in a chain every month. Was the way that he approached this. And he also talks about how he abandoned the machinery of the club. And this is the original proposal of Seymour as this novel starts, is this club, and you're going to get they're literally the minutes of their meetings. That only happens in issue 1. Think of how much this novel wouldn't have gone for 20 issues if every month was Mr. Pickwick and the Pickwickians meeting to talk about their travels over and arguing over, at the club. That worked once. And he also even mentions in this preface on the next page, he mentions the following pages have been written from time to time, almost as a periodical rose. Okay. Having been written for the most part in the society of a dear young friend who is now no more. They are connected in the author's mind at once with the happiest period of his life and with its saddest and most severe affliction.
Miss Mary is back again.
Apparently the happiest period of his life when he was in the society of Mary.
Such a compliment to Catherine,
Yeah. So I wonder how his wife, Mary's sister, his wife feels about that. But, it's Dickens being, very histrionic about his attachment to someone who did mean a great deal to him. But for us reading it now, it's the, the happy, I mean, it's the superlatives that just
always with Dickens.
question.
It's always the superlative,
Yeah.
right?
So, and then he thanks the gentlemen who have done the illustrations. And actually he mentions that, I'm always so behind in writing that I was giving when it's Fizz, he's really talking about, I was just giving him verbal descriptions of what you're supposed to draw, because I can't get the writing done in time to send it to you before we have to go to press. And then what else do we have? Oh, and then there's a table of contents. And this all seems odd could seem odd for the end of the last serial issue. But again, remember, this is designed for taking all these parts and having them bound into your own edition.
Because of course, when it first came out, the serials, these chapters were not written yet.
Yep.
So they wouldn't be available then.
And note too here, for chapter 28, he continues it's chapter 28, a good humored Christmas chapter, and the goblins, it's 28 with an asterisk. So he didn't bother. I'm not going to change all the chapter titles, all the numbers after that. He recognizes, or the publishers did, that you actually have 2 chapter 28s. So now it's chapter 28 asterisk is the second one.
So what's the next one? Is it 29 or 30? Scroll down.
Yeah, it's 29. So,
Okay.
and then it'll be later editions that change this. And I'm pretty certain it's within Dickens' lifetime that they do change it and they shift it. And the Goblins becomes 29 and everything goes up a number, as you'll find in most modern editions of this book. And then we get directions to the binder. Some of these illustrations don't say what page they're supposed to. Some of them have the page number at the bottom that it goes with, and some don't. These illustrations don't have, you don't know where to put them if you just have all the illustrations. So he tells you what page to face them on. And it's mostly these later ones. They had stopped, Fizz had stopped engraving or stopped writing under them what page number. So these have to be directed to where do you put them. And some errata, misnames here on page 278, line 40. The elder Mr. Samuel should be the elder Mr. Weller. Dates that were different, 1830 instead of 1827 it should have read, 1870, 1827. So there were a few mistakes that he caught. And that's it. And you would take all that, you would cut out, most people would cut out all the advertisements, and or they would send to the binder and they would tell him that. Now, Kevin, you have an edition of Bleak House that did not cut out advertisements.
Ed, you're sending me back to my Bleak House after this, because it's kind of sits there in the shelf, and just like 20 months went by in the flash of an eye. It's been years since I really looked at that last one closely. I want to see if it has a similar layout,
because it also has I know it has, like, what they had done was they had taken the book of all your Bleak House parts, this copy that you had bought, that in the past they had taken all the parts and they had put the book together, and then they put the other stuff in the back, like I think advertisements and covers and things like that. But
no, not mine. Mine are still in the parts,
and
mine are just as they came each month. As a matter of fact, it's when you buy one of these things, the auctioneer kind of rates them, and even this back to Johansson again. I was just looking at, like, the quality of so many illustrations were run off these plates that if you were like the 300th or 400th run off the plates, the illustration copy dropped. So, like, they rate all that stuff. Mine is ranked rather high, but I got to go back and see, Ed, what exactly it has at the end. I imagine they have similar instructions if you wanted to bind it.
I wanted to take all this time with this, just to, these are one of the unique, things about reading serial issues. And I wanted to kind of explain this and show these kinds of things and talk about them. But of course, we've got to get to the story.
Yes.
James and Jake are going to join us soon, and we're barely going to be into chapter 1 or the first chapter. So on to our story. In number 18, last month, we had a kind of farewell to the coaching life, with trips to Birmingham, back to London, stops to the coaching inns. Then we had the finale of the Tony Weller Reverend Stiggins rivalry after Mrs. Weller, the widder, has died. And now we're finally at the end. And, he calls it a double issue, yet
it's not 64 pages.
Yeah, all the issues are 32 pages. This is 47 pages of story, but he's got to put all that other stuff in here too. So really doubles it up. That's a little bit of a cheat. He doesn't have to write 64 pages of story for this. And there's not 64 pages of story left to tell about these characters anyway. He's really stretching this out as we finish up.
Should have given Mr. Tupman a double wedding. Could have given him a woman, but no. Alas, no.
Chapter 53 or 52 it is still in the old serial issues, comprising the final exit of Mr. Jingle and Job Trotter, with a great morning of business in Gray's Inn Square, concluding with a double knock at Mr. Perker's door.
I have my Mr. Jingle recently.
To
show off my new ceramics. I got this one just on Thursday at a resale shop. So our new West Indian, I guess it would be West Indian.
Is that a jingle, Kevin?
No,
that's
a Sam.
This is his nemesis, is Sam.
So our new West Indian resident, which I'm sure we'll get to momentarily.
We will momentarily. It starts with we start with Arabella and Mr. Pickwick. She's upset because Mr. Winkle Sr. is not happy with them getting married. Mr. Pickwick couldn't fix that. And I especially like one of the things she says here. She says, what shall we do if he continues to be angry with us? Why, wait patiently, my dear, until he thinks better of it, replied Mr. Pickwick cheerfully. And that's his response to the world. Things will get better, cheerfully. And if not, then she says, well, and then he says later, well, Winkle will find some other friend who will not be backward in helping him to start in the world. So don't worry, things will get better. And if they don't, I'll make it better. That's fine. I'll fix this. I'm, retired enough and have enough money that I can help and fix this. So this is Pickwick. And with her, he's the fatherly figure. He'll take care of her. We see a lot of this kind of benevolent paternalism in Dickens's work. And I think it's his life view as well, that, especially the unfortunate need help, especially women, and he will do what he can to help them. And this is how he thinks of himself in operating in the world. And of course, there's major problems with this in his own personal life, but this is clearly how he thinks it should be. And even in the other book he's writing right now, Oliver Twist, Oliver needs help as this young boy, but it's so much of that Rose Maylie in that novel, that this poor unfortunate girl who gets ill and needs help. And of course, Nancy needs help in the book, but the tragedy is that she doesn't receive it from somebody. And so we have Arabella, and then Dickens or Pickwick. It's interesting how many times I say Dickens instead of Pickwick over the course of these 20 episodes. I've done it frequently. And I think part of my joy for this novel and how much I love this novel is as Dickens and Pickwick get conflated. And they're certainly not the same person. I mean, they really aren't.
And it's really crazy to think of Dickens as younger than me at this time, and I'm like,
yeah. What is his age now?
He was born in 1812, so he'd be 25? Like, mid-20s.
Yeah. He's 25.
Is it 38 already or still 37?
37. So he's 25.
37, so he's 25, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess at this point, like, this phenomenon is just roaring. Like, the marketplace just can't get enough of anything Pickwick, right? The reissuing, the earlier stuff. He's a superstar. My
goodness. Mr. Pickwick goes to see Perkins, and he has a little encounter with Mr. Lowton, who is Perkins's clerk. They talk about how they're going to get they've paid to 10 shillings in the pound to the bill discounter to get him out of the fleet. They mean Jingle, and sending him to Demerara. So
just to jump in there, like, yeah, he's 25, but it's a very knowing 25. This is a person who's seen the inside of a pawn shop, from that side. And of course, he's hiding all that now. But I think that's what makes some of the writing here really good, where he can talk about, bill discounting, because he probably dealt with it with his father.
He's out in the world working from the age of 12. So, stopping into the local pub near where he worked to get, a pint and a sandwich or something as he would get his lunch there. This little pipsqueak. And he was not a tall child either. So he was very going in and getting this meal every day as a worker.
And but I do think it's really interesting to talk about Demerara. Not from what I Googled what that was. It is in South America, in current day Guyana. And it's known for its sugar plantations. So I can only assume he would be somehow a manager at a sugar plantation. And I was thinking about the dates here. I know slavery is abolished in the UK in 1833, but except for small children, it's a gradual manumission for about the next decade. So they're all considered apprentices. And by, I think there's like two dates, like one's like 38, one's in the 40s, when they actually do become liberated. So yeah, unclear exactly what his work is, or you know, he will be at the very least overseeing, assumedly.
These are slave plantations.
Former slaves, potentially at this point.
He could be a clerk in it in some way. I mean, there's so many different positions that he could have been given, and Dickens doesn't specify here. I mean, but it's very much, and this is a device frequently used in British Empire literature, that people have to go off to the colonies to restart their life, to make a new start.
In David Copperfield, there's a whole group. They go to Australia.
They go to Australia at the end, and but even you find, you know, or off to America, the former colony happens sometimes, off to Australia, either as a prisoner or just off to make a new start and to get on with your life. Even one of Dickens's sons goes to Australia.
The one who was buried in New York City, in uptown Manhattan, almost to the Bronx. He's buried. He went on speaking tours and later in life, but yes, he did. I think he was a sheep farmer or something for a while.
But Jingle and Job Trotter are going to be sent to Demerara to work on this plantation.
And then I think somebody else goes to the East Indies, right? Goes to India.
We'll hear that later. Yeah,
Arabella's brother. They won't go there, and they get malaria, but then they quit drinking, so they're okay.
And again, a fascinating advertisement that I do want to bring up quickly is if you look through that kind of inset silverware ad in the back, you know, a lot of it's just, you know, for plate and, you know, forks and stuff. But there's actually an advertisement for, it says, you know, medicine, you know, health without physic or health without medicine. And it's for an enema kit. It comes in a mahogany box with a lock and key, and it says highly recommend it for anyone going to the East or West Indies. So it is this. So yes. So again, this idea of disease as well when you're going off to these colonies is present and is mentioned a few times too. You know, Jingle says, "Oh, of course I'll pay you back. You know, unless the yellow fever gets me first."
Yeah. And when
I don't think the enemas are going to help with yellow fever, but you know, if anything, it's going to make it worse. But you know,
maybe if you use quinine, it'll help.
I don't. I don't think they discovered quinine yet. I think that's
that's not yet.
That's later in the century. Yeah.
Perker tells him that, or not, Lowton tells him that, you know, Job Trotter insists on going with him. They tried to get Job Trotter a clerk's job in England, but he won't go. And he says that Trotter says that he's meaning Jingle, he's the only friend he ever had, and he's attached to him and all that. And Lowton says, friendship's a very good thing in its way. We are all very friendly and comfortable at the stump, for instance, over our grog, where every man pays for himself. But damn hurting yourself for anybody else, you know. No man should have more than 2 attachments, the first to number 1 and the second to the ladies. That's what I say. Ha ha. And you know, that really rings hollow, I think, for a man like Pickwick. And it probably really rings hollow for readers at this point in this book, that goes on to constantly shows the true value of friendship. And as these final chapters will do as well. And I think this little piece with Lowton there is to kind of accentuate that. Like, this is the cynical view that some people have, but we know what it's really like to have true friendships. And Job Trotter is representing that, as they become the kind of, Trotter and Jingle are like this, you know, mirror of Dickens, of Pickwick and Sam.
And there's also that element of sort of this medieval relationship between the Lord and his, you know, faithful social inferior, if you will, that put their lives on hold in favor of the Lord of the Manor, as we see with Sam and his marital endeavors.
Yeah. And we have Jake joining us now. Jake is going to be Jake's going to say, like, you're only at what chapter? Yeah, we're still just in the first. We took a little bit to get to it, but that's okay. Welcome, Jake. Going to be Jake's going to say,
hang on, sorry.
there you go. Now I can hear you.
Hello, everybody. I've been enjoying it
Welcome.
so far.
And hi, James. Welcome to you too. You all set there? Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Beautiful. All righty. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. We're only still on the first chapter for the issue. We took a while to go through. I wanted to go through the apparatus and the serial part. I don't know if you were watching, but that's what we wound up spending most of the time on. So that's what Ed wound up spending most of the time on. Because I think that stuff's important. But now we're finally into the issue, and I'll chat with you. We'll chat a little bit towards the end about, your experience reading this too, as I did with Courtney and Kevin at the start. But I think we should continue with the chapters to begin with, and feel free to chime in yourselves on these too, as we all will now. Talk about these because Jingle appears on the scene now. We get Jingle's final stage appearance, because it all feels very stagey. This is, everybody has to come on to take their bows for one final, time. And Jingle does here as well. And he's very humbled, but he, and we even get a mention of how much money Pickwick has had to pay, to get him free. I mean, 50 pounds just as one part of it, and just to take care of his clothes and to get him the passage. And but Jingle still has the same delivery when Perker says, that Mr. Pickwick has lost 50 pounds. He says, not lost, pay it all, stick to business, cash up every farthing. Yellow fever, perhaps, can't help that. If not, and then he strikes the crown of his hat with great violence, passing his eyes, hand over his eyes, and sat down. Like, what a great little actor he is, mimicking his death there if he gets yellow fever. We find out that Dismal Jemmy, who here's one of the things we have, everybody. Like, Dickens loves to tie everyone together, but also he's reminding us, remember back in the very first number 20 months ago or 19 months ago. No, it was 20 because it was skipped a month in the middle. Dismal Jemmy came and we met him, and then he tells a story, but that actually starts in number 2. This stroller's tale story he tells. But we even find out now that Dismal Jemmy is the brother of Job Trotter. And I love these connections that Dickens makes. Give me your take on this, guys, because I think that Dickens loves to tie everyone together, and this happens always. And for most people, it's this kind of coincidence doesn't seem real, but for Dickens, it seems like a kind of theme. Anybody go?
I remember once sitting with a Dickensian in a restaurant in New York City, and who should come in and sit down at the table right next to us, but a Dickensian from London that we knew. And we just sort of happened to be seated at tables right next to each other in the middle of New York, and people remarking about how Dickens gets a lot of criticism for too many coincidences. And yet, with the coincidences that we experience in real life, they're often even greater. So when I was reading this, I was like, oh, come on, it's his brother, really? But it's the kind of thing that actually does happen in real life.
Yeah. And for this too, there's no point to it. Like, it doesn't help you anything. It doesn't help to further the story along. It's just like saying, and you know what? They're brothers. How about that? Which again gets to this idea that he loves this idea that we're connected. And if you just take a second, you'll find those connections.
And just to jump in on your story, James, in the next novel, Nicholas Nickleby, That's exactly what happens with Nicholas and Sir Mulberry Hawk. Remember, they sit
Yeah.
down in the restaurant, back-to-back booths, and Nicholas overhears the nefarious plot. So yeah, art imitates life, however, or life art. Even if there is a couple of 100 years in between.
The biggest coincidence for me happened in Great Expectations. I'm not going to go into them here, but for people that read that novel, that by the end you're like, what? And this person is related to who? And it's just, and it winds up being, this is crazy, but Dickens makes the point of it. Jake?
I think here it's also a way of making this seem like a real ending, right? This last double number, I mean, it's very typical of the melodrama and of various forms of
I was
sort
going
of.
to say it comes from the melodrama. Although, as Ed mentions, this one doesn't really have like an emotional heft or doesn't really do anything to learn.
No, but it does push the button of this is an ending, right? Rather than making it feel like, and then there was one more issue, and at the end of it, there wasn't another one. It creates that sense, that sort of ingrained sense of, oh, once the relationships are being revealed, that's a readerly experience of wrapping upness.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've learned that even Dismal Jemmy goes off to at least a former colony. He emigrated to America. Everybody's sent off to other countries. Many people are sent off to other countries in Dickens novels, or especially at the end of them. And now Jingle's farewell is interesting because he's, it's silent. Turning to his benefactor, stood for a few seconds as if irresolute what to say or how to act. Job Trotter relieved his perplexity, for with a humble and grateful bow to Mr. Pickwick, he took his friend gently by the arm and led him away. That's un-Dickensian for him to do the subtle, this is a very humble, subtle thing, and then goodbye. Usually there needs to be some speech, somebody doing something, some kind of stage business happening. And I think it's touching in a way how he gives, Jingle is gone, and Perker talks about right away, he's like, well, there's a chance. I hope it may prove a good one. That he has a chance. There's hope of him, fixing his life finally. And not just spending it, conning people out of their money. Dodson and Fogg now get to make their appearance, and Mr. Pickwick stands his ground. He's going to be in there. Now, remember, he's had to pay off all these expenses from the court case he lost because, of their chicanery and pressing the suit. And then we even get the numbers. The taxed costs are 133 pounds, 6 shillings, 4 pence. And then I guess that's besides this, the what do you call it? The settlement that he's already had, not the settlement, but the judgment
award.
Yeah, that he's already probably had to pay. I don't know how it quite works. Did he have to still pay the judgment, or does he just have to pay what the lawyers would have got?
Oh yeah. They're not letting them off the hook. No way. I wonder if they got a third the way modern lawyers get a third if they take a case on contingency, as they say now. I guess then it was speculation or whatnot.
Yeah.
Sam blew him up in the courthouse for doing.
Well, he finally can't hold it in any longer, and he finally has to tell them, "Wait one instant, I will speak." And basically, it's just a lead up to calling them a pair of mean, rascally, pettifogging robbers, and then can't stop saying it. He says it like 3 times, and then as they're leaving, robbers, and everybody's trying to hold him back. And the anger of Pickwick is really funny because he is such a benevolent, joyful man, but when something's wrong, he's gonna put the dukes up. And
hard not to wonder if he's going to get sued for defamation in the sequel at that moment.
I know.
Yeah. Setting up the sequel.
Yeah. Because he doesn't assault them. They want him to assault him. It's Fogg that's going to get punched, though. Dodson's like, don't let him assault you, Mr. Fogg. Don't return on any account. Yeah, well, you're not the one getting hit. It's easy to say. But of course, that doesn't happen, and they managed to get them out, and now we've said our farewells to Dodson and Fogg as well. Chapter 54, containing some particulars relative to the double knock, which has just happened in this chapter. There's a double knock at the door, the chapter ends, and other matters, among which certain interesting disclosures relative to Mr. Snodgrass and a young lady are by no means irrelevant to this history. Joe the Fat Boy comes on for, actually, he'll get an extended time. He's pretty much here for most of the end of the novel. Falling asleep, he knocks on the door and then he falls asleep, and they have to, wake him up. And really his only job here at this chat is he's just Mr. Wardle's here, basically, is all he's saying. And but we get like a page or a couple pages of them talking to him and waking him and description of him. Boy, that original audience loved Joe the Fat Boy, man.
My favorite character. I loved it.
And you love him this much too. For me, he's like, but
I smile every time Fat Boy. That's thing.
Yeah.
Does he make your flesh creep, Courtney?
He does indeed, yes.
Yes.
He's a little creepy, right? He's a little creepy with Mary too.
He will. Yes, he will.
He is leering. Again, I think unclear exactly what the illustrations make him look like 10 to 12, but unclear exactly what.
He's definitely creepy later.
What boy means in terms of a servant, yeah.
Before we get to the rest of this chapter, I want to do a little announcement to do our little mid break now, especially as I have James and Jake on too. So I want to share this letter that I got, the email that I got today as part of this. But I want to take this moment to thank all of you for watching this episode. As a nonprofit organization, the Rosenbach Museum and Library depends on the generosity of friends and supporters like you to keep programs like this free and accessible to hundreds of fellow Dickens lovers worldwide. If you'd like to donate to the Rosenbach, you can do so at our website. You could also become a member. Membership gives you free museum admission, discounts on programs and courses, exclusive invitations to member-only events, both in person and online. We do lots of things like that. You can learn more about how to become a member on our website. I'm just putting a couple links into the chat about that now too. If you have already donated to the Rosenbach or joined as a member, thank you so much. That's how I get to do these shows, and doing so also helps us care for the collections, care for all the many things that we've shared during this show. I want to share two things coming up. One of them is that we're running our BiblioVentures show right now, the weekly show, and that is it's called BiblioVentures Monsters and Ghosts, and we're finishing up 6 episodes on The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and then we're going to do 6 episodes on Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol. And James will come on for episode 6 of A Christmas Carol when we talk about the legacy of a Dickensian Christmas. Thank you, James, for doing that. And they will start off, if you're, it starts on November 11th, 2024. If you're watching this live or you're watching this before then, that's when we start doing those on Monday night, of the Christmas Carol episodes. If you're just watching the recording, we record them, so they're all there for you to watch and catch up at any time. We're also starting a new BiblioVenture because Pickwick is ending. What am I going to do with one Saturday every month? I need to fill up my time, right? Well, we just finished Sherlock Mondays, in which we went up doing 40 episodes on Sherlock Holmes stories.
Wow.
Well, 8 of them were subscription only, Hound of the Baskervilles, and then there were 30 episodes on stories, and then 2 episodes on other detectives of the time. I did a couple of the other detectives. And Sherlock Mondays is now going to become Sherlock Monthly. And that will begin in November next month. So in place of Pickwick, you can all tune in on the one Saturday a month and talk about a Sherlock Holmes story. And we're going to pick up where we left off, which was the Norwood Builder. We're doing the stories in chronological order. So the Adventure of the Norwood Builder will be next month. You can join us. You can register on the Rosenbach's webpage for that. I'm putting that link in the chat here as well. And now I want to do this one, the corresponding members of Pickwick Monthly. I haven't done this segment for a few episodes because we were sharing collections items. I needed the time for that. But I got this email this morning from one of our dedicated Pickwick watchers. I'm hoping you're watching right now, Bernice. Bernice, I had shared a note from Bernice in number 6, Pickwick Monthly, when she talked about her beloved cat, Iris, had died, and watching this show kind of really brought joy to her in those tough times. And this morning, I got this message from Bernice. This message was meant, dear Ed, this message was meant to be written and sent to you days ago. However, I had several medical appointments that lasted longer than I expected, as well as more exhausting than I wanted. In any case, I hope this reaches you before our last Pickwick Papers session today. Thank you so very much for bringing an element of joy to me these last 2 years. As I mentioned to you before, I lost my darling cat and best friend, Iris Kaplan, in August 2023. Her passing was a tremendous loss for me, and I still grieve for her daily. Bernice then recounts some recent health misfortunes she's also been dealing with, and then she finishes with, but enough of my tales of woe. Your wonderful monthly sessions of Pickwick Papers helped me to laugh when I needed the laughter so badly. You and your co-hosts were brilliant, and I enjoyed what each of you had to say. I will miss the characters from this delightful novel, especially Mr. Pickwick and Sam Weller, who are both very humorous as well as beautiful human beings. I thoroughly enjoyed the extra Dickensian topics you covered in each of the presentations. I learned a great deal during these months. I can go on and on, but I don't want to take up your very busy time. Believe me, you can take up my time. I wish you good health and continued success with your upcoming presentations. Best regards to your co-hosts, one of your greatest and most appreciative fans, Bernice. Thank you so much, Bernice. I mean, this is why I love doing these Biblioventure shows. I mean, especially this one, to spread a little Pickwickian joy and love in the world is certainly well worth our time. So, so thank you as well, co-hosts, for that. I mean, this show is all of us doing this together, and it's very nice that someone is that attached to it. But anyway, and even as the show ends, you can always send me an email. If you're watching this as a replay, someday in the future, you can send me an email at epettit, P-E-T-T-I-T, @rosenbach.org, and I would be happy to hear from you, and will return your message. And there's my email in the chat too.
What a lovely note.
Man, I tell you, it makes it worth it. Over 50 hours or almost 50 hours of Pickwickian content we have created. And it's there for people to, it would take you 2 days solid to watch all the shows at once. And it's not for naught, which is, which is good to know. All right, back to Joe the Fat Boy. Joe in the chat says, I hated Joe the Fat Boy when I first read this. It spoiled my enjoyment. It took effort to look past him. So not everyone loved him. Maybe Joe, you were too self-conscious about Joe the Fat Boy. I don't know. And you thought that you didn't want to identify your name with that character. Although I'm reading Jekyll and Hyde, and I love that he's Edward Hyde. That's just fabulous.
I thought that the illustration with Joe the Fat Boy in this double installment was one of the best illustrations, and you can just see the joy as he sees his 2 favorite things, a pretty girl and food.
We'll get to that in just a second. Because we want to share that. Here he says that Wardle's here. Wardle comes in and it's just brief. We don't need to talk too much about this, but Wardle announces that Emily and Snodgrass have been writing letters to each other, I guess, since Christmas. They've fallen in love. And Mr. Pickwick needs to, and Mr. Wardle needs to figure out what to do. And Perker's like, well, why don't you and Pickwick convene and figure it out? Although he says, like, although I know what you're going to do, which is let the kids get married. And then we go back to the hotel where they're staying, and because Wardle has brought Emily with him, and she's with Arabella, and they and as we head back to there, trying to find it on my text. There it is. There, Snodgrass is there. Snodgrass is there visiting with Emily, and he knows he has to leave because Wardle's going to return soon, and he tries, and he gets trapped, and he can't get out the door, and the one door's locked. So he's in the next room where Wardle and Pickwick and I'm sorry, no, first Joe comes in. Joe the fat boy comes in and catches him there, and they bribe Joe. They're like, hey, he's like, hey, Joe, here's, what does he give him? Like five shillings. Hey, Joe, nice to see you. Here's 5 shillings. They want him to keep quiet. They're trying to bribe him, right? And then Joe gets to have Joe's, and then they say, well, how about you have a nice meat pie? Well, that's what he wants. He didn't want the 5 shillings. And he has this meat pie, but he gets to have it in the company of Mary. And this is the one illustration.
And
Here.
I muted myself to say that I have that. I think I might have shown this, but I do have that illustration in mug form as well. Although they took a random serving woman and replaced her. So we have Fat Boy. It's hard to see. We've got Fat Boy, we have Mary, and we have Pickwick placed behind them instead of the random serving. They added Pickwick instead. Yeah.
Here is the illustration from Fizz that James was just mentioning. And yeah, I mean, and this is an enormous meat pie, right? So I don't even think I could eat this meat pie, let alone, and he's definitely a boy here. I mean, this is, he's not that old. And this is just heaven for him. And of course, Mary looking very dainty here. Although it's like almost like she's doing some trick here with the chair. Like, watch how I lift the chair. This levitating chair trick she's doing behind her. It's just like a weird composition from Fizz. Like, I don't know what Fizz was thinking when he's putting the chair in there like that.
It made me think of a Hogarth print, Ed, where typically if the furniture is flying around, it means there's something rascally going on with the females in the print.
Interesting.
Typically. Yeah, like disruptive furniture means, he was chasing her around the room or something.
Interesting. Joe is flirting with her at the same time, and I'm sure it was much funnier to the 19th century audience. It just seems really creepy. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe I'm not. Like, maybe it was creepy to them too. Like, this is just really creepy, Joe. He's like, and then he tries to kiss her.
What does it say? His look is between like a wink and a leer or something. I forget. There's two adjectives that are used.
Yeah, it's if it was, I know, and she says, oh, isn't this pie nice? And he says, I know a nicerer. Oh no, she says, what a nice young lady Miss Emily is. I know a nicerer. Indeed, yes, indeed, replied the fat boy with unwanted vivacity. Yeah, it gets really creepy. But maybe that's creepy for that audience too. And I'm just,
well, Sam is going to cuff him later on.
Yeah.
So
Sam will correct him for this later.
Sam clearly thinks that this is inappropriate.
But also he tries to kiss her. She eludes him because he's easy to elude. And then and then it says, upon which the apathetic youth ate a pound or so of steak with a sentimental countenance and fell fast asleep. So it's like, he'll like pursue her, and then it's like, oh, and then he just eats and falls asleep anyway. So if she let him kiss him, he'd probably fall asleep during the kiss. because that's what, Joe does. So there's no real worry. There's no danger with Joe the fat boy. But he's definitely creepy.
It's between a squint and a cast. His eyes, put his eyes into something between a squint and a cast. I'm not sure what that even means, but
well, that happens. And then then the Wardle, then Snodgrass gets stuck in the room. Wardle arrives with Pickwick and then also Ben Allen and Winkle. And then this is when Snodgrass gets caught there and he can't get out of the room. And so the others come in and they greet. Ben Allen greets his sister Arabella, and he gives her a hug, and then she's, "Oh, Ben dear, how you do smell of tobacco." And it just makes me think of what, my wife must think every time, I hug her, is that I smell of tobacco, because I do. And luckily it doesn't repel her. They're there and then Joe winds up appearing, and it's unusual what's going on here at first. Like, it's because he knows he has a secret and he can't tell it, and so he's acting strangely. And then I know he goes in the other room and sees Snodgrass and then comes out and can't seem to contain this knowledge that he has, that that Wardle doesn't know. I mean, Wardle is his master, Joe is his servant. But he acts bizarrely, and Wardle thinks he's drunk, and Pickwick thinks he's insane. Because of the faces that he's making, the things, and he's trying to tell Pickwick maybe that he's about Snodgrass in the other room. We never get an explanation, do we? I think maybe Snodgrass has maybe told him to tell Pickwick he's there, maybe, and Joe's trying to relay that information. He wants
to whisper to Pickwick, but without telling Wardle. I think he was instructed to tell Pickwick and not tell Wardle, and he's confused about how to make this happen.
But we don't get confirmation of that. But that's what I think's going on too. Do we, or do I think that because there is confirmation of it? I'm not sure.
Well, ultimately, it is all explained why he ended up in that odd position.
Say that. What's that again? Say that again.
It is ultimately explained why Snodgrass is in this bizarre position. So he's found, it's discovered, it looks really bad, and then they have to explain it all.
Yeah, and then Snodgrass just comes out as they start talking about him. Wardle does. Snodgrass just reveals himself. He comes out of the room and he gives his little, declaration. He loved Mr. Wardle's daughter deeply and sincerely. He was proud to avail that the feeling was mutual, and that if thousands of miles were placed between them or oceans rolled their waters, he could never for an instant forget those happy days when first, etc., etc. Like, even Dick is like, I'm not going to continue with this. Snodgrass is, he's not the great poet he thinks he is. And then Wardle's response is basically, well, why didn't you say so in the first place? But it takes Arabella to convince him of that, right? Arabella is the one that has to plead for the couple, because she has had this same thing going on with Winkle. And then they married in secret, and she sees that this couple should be together as well. And Arabella brings them together, and it's interesting because it's usually Pickwick has to bring people together. And here Arabella serves that purpose. And that's I think that's the only, it's the only marriage that happens that well, Pickwick, I still do it. Pickwick, still has to bring them together. Like, they have to get married at his house, and he has to make sure that he blesses the union and all of that. And then they have a nice little party. The evening was excellent. Little Mr. Perker came out wonderfully, told comic stories, sang a song. Arabella was charming. Mr. Wardle was jovial. Mr. Pickwick harmonious. Mr. Ben Allen uproarious. The lovers of silent. Mr. Winkle very talkative, and all of them very happy. And this happens several times in these last few chapters where we get this like, hey, everybody had a great time and we're all happy. And Dickens just is really letting us know that this is a novel about joy, especially at the end of it here. Chapter 55, Tony Weller and the Widow's Will here. Well, it's Mr. Solomon Pell, assisted by a select committee of coachmen, arranges the affairs of the elder Mr. Weller. Weller finds the will, which is just scribbled on a note in one of the jars, and it's giving Sam 200 pounds, and everything else goes to Tony, and he doesn't know what to do with it because it's a legal thing, and he can't figure that out. Sam says, "You're a nice egg-zeketer, E-G-G, egg, Z-E-K-I-T-E-R," and that he's got to, he tells his father, "You'd better get your out-of-door clothes on and come to town about this business."
Well, it's funnier even than that, because he says, well, now that we've read it, we should put it in the fire, right?
Yeah.
He says, what are you talking about? And they, of course, at this point in this novel, better burn it before the lawyers see it is a understandable, if not a legally responsible intuition on Mr. Weller's part.
He's just afraid of anything legal, like this will hurt you. And no, it's actually giving you all of the money, all of her stocks that she's been acquiring over the years. She's kind of wealthy, as it turns out, running this, running this, I guess, successful, Marcus Granby pub, and then investing her money, apparently. All these years of her not, or following the temperance people has maybe helped her save money. Well, Tony Weller doesn't, he tells Sam that, Sam thinks he's not smart, but Mr. Weller lets him know that you'll find as you get wider, you get wiser. So, vith and wisdom. So, I'm hoping as I get fatter, I'm getting wiser. So I hope that that's true as I go on through life. But that's Tony Weller's philosophy. And they go to see Solomon Pell. Solomon Pell was a lawyer that helped when Sam faked not being able to pay the debt, so he'd be put in the prison. That was the person that they went to take care of that. He's kind of this legal legal man who's not very on the up and up. So but they have to get other coachmen to help them because you need more. You need to have this coachman quorum or something, according to Tony Weller. So they get the two other very fat coachmen, and they have to be fat coachmen because a good coachman ought to be fat. That'd be ridiculous if he was skinny. And then we get just more of this funny legal business. It's just not a ton going on right now, except let's just do some funny business stuff here and legal puns, probe and probate, legatees and leg at ease, or legatees and leg at ease. We get that pun. And then also lots of food and drink as they're figuring this out. The more comments about widows. There's more widows is married than single women. And then the probe and the legatees, and then they all refresh them. Oh, Mr. Pell refreshed himself with three chops and liquids, both malt and spirituous, at the expense of the estate. And this is the other Fizz illustration. It's odd that this is the illustration, right? The fat boy at the meat pie and this are Like I never quite, and maybe it's just Dickens didn't give him enough to go by. And just like, all right, just draw this. They're all the fat coachmen and draw them toasting each other.
He was really hungry when he was doing these illustrations. He just couldn't get food out of his mind.
Here's the second one. And here they are.
I mean, you can also think of too of the, of your popular stand-up characters too. People, like we said, really love the fat boy.
Yeah.
They really love Sam and his Wellerisms and his dad, right? So maybe that might be more important than something that we would assume would naturally be, something to tie it up, like a picture of the wedding at the end, or, Pickwick at his house, or Sam Weller and his sons, or something like that, right?
And in the final issue, you get that vignette in the beginning has, Sam and Pickwick in it. And then the illustrated title page again has Mr. Weller and Sam in the background cheering him on. And now the fat boy and Weller again, Mr. Weller again. That's just this is what you want. This is what I'll give you. Everybody loves Tony Weller. Well, then here's even two illustrations of him. Here he is, and Sam next to him, and then the other fat coachman, and Solomon Pell sitting, and all their the shelves of the remnants of their oyster dinner on the table.
And the floor.
And the floor. Can't keep that stuff off the floor. It's just going everywhere. Oysters, oysters, oysters. I went and had oysters the other night after work. I just stopped and got oysters and martinis, and it's just amazing how oysters were everywhere in the 19th century. I mean, and even into the 20th. It was just, it was cheap, and everybody ate oysters.
We're fortunate they're not everywhere today.
Oh, I wish there were an oyster bar.
I remember one time I was out
street.
eating with Jake, and he got a plate of raw oysters. Can't do it.
An oyster cellar on every street in Philadelphia. Man, that's what I want. Just street to street.
Street oysters is what you want. Street oysters.
Oysters and gin, right?
And
Yes.
gin, yeah.
Well, I did drink gin, admittedly, today. Hot water and gin. So
I want modern gin, though. I don't want their gin. Their gin really wasn't what we would call gin. It was just, turpentine or whatever. Just alcohol that will kill you. No, but so this is the final Fizz illustration then for this. One of in the grouping for this. Does Sam have something in? Yeah, he does. This is a feather in his hat, right? This hat's not broken, is it? No, that's a feather. He has a little feather in his hat here. And this is it. This is the final shot. So all of our lovely Fizz illustrations over the last 17 months, some Fizz took over. They get all this taken care of, and now there's these stocks that have to be taken care of, and then they go and meet Wilkins Flasher Esquire, stockbroker. This book is ending, and Dickens is like, hey, here's a great new character to bring on. And so you get like 2 or 3 pages on Wilkins Flasher. All he does is just welcome them to his house, and then he takes them down, and they cash the stocks, and he gets his cut and goes away. But the details, right? He goes in the house, and Flasher and his I guess this is his clerk with him.
Simmery.
So you get 2 characters, and they talk about betting on everything. Everything is a bet.
Betting if Boffer is going to kill himself in a big smash.
Somebody they know it's been lost all his money, and they have this, macabre humor about how he's going to kill himself. Maybe he'll hang himself. Maybe he'll do this. Maybe, and it's a bet in the end.
And who's going to outbid the other for the guy's wine collection for the port? It's like an extended metaphor. It just keeps going.
I mean, even just the opening paragraph to introduce him, the office of Wilkins Flasher Esquire of the Stock Exchange was in the first floor up a court behind the Bank of England. The house of Wilkins Flasher Esquire was at Brixton, Surrey. The horse and stanhope of Wilkins Flasher Esquire was at an adjacent livery stable. The groom of, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, he's taking a lot of effort to establish Wilkins Flasher as a character in this novel that's over in like 10 serial pages from now. I love it that Dickens has like, this is what he does. This is what he does every month. And why should that change in the last issue? I'm still going to create these vignettes of these little characters that you will remember. In the Pickwick Club I'm in Philadelphia, we have a Wilkins Flasher. One of the people is Wilkins Flasher. That is, he's memorable after the novel is over. And it's good if you're in the serial times, like to be like, you want to be in one of the later issues, so you'll have a better chance of being remembered than one of the early. So who's going to remember Dismal Jemmy unless they bring his name back at the end, right? So especially the first 3 issues that nobody bought.
I wonder if Dickens, to us, some of the ones that catch fire seem so unpredictable. I wonder if he could tell. I wonder if he knew who was going to make it, or if the Victorians were as unpredictable to themselves as they are to us.
Probably he didn't know. I mean, we know that with Mrs. Gamp in Martin Chuzzlewit, he didn't think she was going to have much legs. He was going to have her in for a little bit, and then everybody responded, so he brought her back.
Right.
Because he can respond in time with the serial issues to do that. Maybe he thought Wilkins Flasher he could use him again in the future for something. He could think he could use all these characters again. Now he will, in a sense, as we'll get to at the end with Master Humphrey's Clock, but there's no sign that even as he finishes this novel, as we see the way it ends, that he could easily have in his mind he could use people again for different things, because this is all new. There's nothing to say that he can't. Just because he didn't doesn't mean that he doesn't think at this time that he can't use them again. We get a little go ahead. You were gonna say something?
I was going to say, I love how he riffs on the W thing again, So
It's
there
exactly
we
what I
are
was
again with
pointing
that,
out.
If
And they
Tony
go-
Weller's not yelling from the back of the courtroom about the letter, now they're back trying to figure out, and Sam just basically tackles him and says, just sign and
Yeah.
shut up about the W already.
He goes up. He's supposed to go to
It's
the
not a V, it's a
board
W.
with the W, and he says, no, we's our letter, meaning V, because he can't say W. He says that he reverses them. This won't do. And Sam has to force him to go there and sign it. And the funds are transferred. And then they go off to audit the accounts, which is audit. But he's 1,180 pounds. Dude, that's a lot of money then. He's well off. He could just sit around and drink and enjoy himself for the rest, drink and eat oysters, and enjoy himself for the rest of it, and smoke his pipes in the pub. But no, he still wants to drive his coach.
Now, my theory here is so they go to these stockbrokers and the stock gets sold. Like, what are they actually selling? The stock in the bar, the liquor license, was it sort of a small number of liquor licenses that were issued? So, there was sort of a market like for taxi medallions in New York where, at any given moment, a given license was worth something because, there had to be a buyer, there had to be some liquidity here. So this is kind of interesting, who actually bought the stock of the business.
I think I think she has invested in stocks in businesses, and that's what he's cashing here.
I thought it was the stock of the business. What do we have any other thoughts on that?
I thought there was a line about she's invested in the funds, and those funds being probably government bonds.
Yeah, she's made investments.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was in this part or if it was in the last issue.
That's how I took it also, but it is kind of funny that after all this gag about how the stock market is just degenerate gamblers who can't help betting on everything they bump into, it turns out the stock market works perfectly.
Yeah. It's functioning.
I'm looking at the actual line here. I controlled F it. I controlled F it, so I'm not sure the page number here, but it says so to which sum he has added the house and business, lease, goodwill, stock, and fixtures. So I believe that is relating to the physical establishment of the house. The things are inside of it. Think of today when you sell a house for a tear down. Sometimes people come and buy like the light fixtures and stuff, the physical elements of the bar. And also if you're buying into, it says the goodwill. So like maybe it's just whoever bought the establishment and is continuing on the Marquis of Granby name, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you're buying a license, you're buying the business, as Weller did before this and became a proprietor. He bought it from somebody else. I forget the exact circumstances, but.
Well, at the end of the day, he's got 1,180 pounds. And oh my goodness, what is he going to do with that? Which we'll find out in the next chapter, 56, our penultimate chapter.
You can find.
What's that?
Yeah, you come into money, what do? You give it to the richest guy you can find.
An important conference takes place between Mr. Pickwick and Samuel Weller, at which his parent assists. And then an old gentleman in a snuff-colored suit arrives unexpectedly. Weller wants to give all his money to the, but he needs to give it to the most trustworthy rich person that he knows. And everybody trusts Mr. Pickwick. He wants to continue being a coachman. And first when he gets there, he won't talk at first, and he's kind of, embarrassed that he has to come and do this thing. And then Sam has to jump in and let him know that, the governor's been withdrawing his money. And this is what starts it. It ain't no use to me. I'm going to work a coach regular and ain't got no wares to keep it in unless I was to pay the guard for taking care of it or to put it in one of the coach pockets. Like, I've got all this money. Part of the humor is like, could have just kept investing it. There are banks. You could do something. You don't have to, because it's yours, you don't have to have it on you all the time or in.
But I don't.
Cashed. Go ahead.
I don't think he understands how to do that, though.
No.
He doesn't know how he would do the investing, and he doesn't trust himself.
No.
He feels like if I had this, I would make some mistake, and I'd either invest it with the wrong people, or maybe he is going to keep it in the coach and then all gets stolen. And he thinks that Pickwick would know how to invest this for him.
Yeah. And Sam knows that too. He'll go lending it to somebody or investing property in horses or dropping his pocketbook down an alley or making an Egyptian mummy of himself in some way or another. That Sam knows that he can't handle this, having all this money. So his solution is Mr. Pickwick, and he just puts his pocketbook in his hands and runs out the door.
The examples are not coming to my mind well enough right now, but it is a trope in Dickens, right? This sort of figure of the suddenly rich working man whose life is worse because of this money.
Our mutual friend, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Even Pip is a version of this, I suppose, or he narrates himself that way, Joe, who is so disgusted with himself when he has to put on nice clothes in Great Expectations. You could do an ideological analysis of this, I suppose, but I think there's a certain it's like, well, not to get ahead of ourselves, right? But it's like of course I will always be the servant, right? There's a sense that people's natural station is sort of right and appropriate, and that when people mess with it too much, it's terrible for everybody.
Yeah.
Of course, yes, the beloved Sam character, what does he say? Oh, I don't care. You don't even have to pay me. I'll stay with you forever, which is, an insane thing to say. We would believe today.
And Mr. Weller's position in life is coachman. He has no business having 1,180 pounds. That's not what he's supposed to have. He's supposed to drive a coach. and flirt with the ladies because it's okay because coachmen are allowed to flirt with ladies because they know that they're not available to them. This is reasoning earlier. But that's his position in life, and he needs to be happy with that, and he's completely flustered now that he's been this money's going to take him out of it. I think you're right, Jake. Well, Sam grabs him and drags him back, and Mr. Pickwick says, Mr. Pickwick, I can't, I have more money than I ever need, far more than a man at my age can ever live to spend. No man knows how much he can spend till he tries, observed Mr. Weller. That's why he can't be trusted with the money. Yeah, I could try to spend all that money. Maybe a lot of oysters. A lot of clams. There you go. Get the money pun in there. And then he threatens that he'll keep a pike, that he'll be a turnpike keeper who we have seen in this novel and who has been and is a very disparaged position, especially for a coachman. These men who take tolls and play tricks on people, give them the wrong direction and stuff like that. And that does the trick, even with Mr. Pickwick. It's like, okay, you can't be a turnpike keeper. All right, I'll take care of your money then. The threat was such an awful one, it says in the text. Well, now Mr. Pickwick sends Sam out so he can talk to Sam's father about the fact that Sam and Mary well, he asked Mr. Weller, what about Mary? Because that young girl you just met, what'd you think of her? He says, very pleasant and conformable. Obviously the pun being comfortable, but he says conformable, which is like the har, sexist joke that, Dickens is all in for. Yes, women need to be conformable, especially when you marry them. As Dickens really kind of does with Catherine, as evident in some of the early letters. One of the early letters we shared, like when he's telling her how to read a book. This is the way that women are supposed to in the 19th century go into their marriages. But they have that little joke.
And then we learn later in a few lines that Tony winked lasciviously at her as well. Poor Mary can't get a break.
At least
the young and old is
unfatherly.
constant for a poor comely maid.
Unfatherly. It was the
unfatherly. Yeah, we don't have to go with stronger words, but yes.
Well, yeah, that's his impression. So, but in any case, he thinks she's nice and she's not a widow. So that's about the only thing that she's got going for Tony. Well, she's not a widow. So there's no danger there, right? But Mr. Pickwick, like she's, I wish to free you from the restraint which your present position imposes upon you. And then he tells Sam as he brings Sam in, and to mark my sense of your fidelity and many excellent qualities by enabling you to marry this girl at once and to earn an independent livelihood for yourself and family. And this is odd that people, I think, especially now, won't quite understand, is that servants just can't marry. Because they'll lose their number one. Most servants aren't allowed to marry in certain positions, and especially in a big house kind of thing, like the head can marry the head butler can marry the head maid kind of thing, but you can't. Not everybody can do that. And if you get married, then because you get married, you have to keep a house with children, and so you can't do that where you're living as a servant usually. So you can't have these little family units unless it's a really big house. But servants have to get permission to marry, and they have to make sure that because they have to be living with this family, whoever they're serving all the time, and so it's problematic. And Sam needs to be on his own and able to get married, but that will all be taken care of anyway by Mr. Pickwick. But Sam right away is, it can't be done. What's to become of you, sir? My rambles, Sam, are over. He's not going to ramble on, and he's at Led Zeppelin song. His rambles are over. And then Sam's like, how do I know that? Maybe you'll decide to do something else. And then he says, no, I'm just going to stay home. And then Sam's like, well, then I certainly need to stay here to take care of you because you can't take care of yourself. Of course, something's going to happen, then he'll need Sam. He'll need somebody's help, and Sam's the one that has to do it. So Sam's told already, I've already talked to Mary, and she has no problem waiting. And then he says, she's ready to wait till I'm ready, and I believe she will. And if she don't, then she's not the young woman I take her for, and I'll give her up with readiness. Like if she can't wait for me and wants to go off with somebody else, all right, then that's what she'll do. I was right to not marry her then. So Sam's okay with it, and Mr. Pickwick, who could combat this resolution? Not Mr. Pickwick. He derived at that moment, more pride and luxury of feeling from the disinterested attachment of his humble friends than 10,000 protestations from the greatest men living could have awakened in his heart. I like how Sam's not his servant in this right now. Sam is his humble friend, and that's a real blur of distinction in this book that Sam does. That Sam's loyalty is as of a friend, that I need to help you, not one of subservience. I think, and they're really trying to make that point here, and I guess that probably did happen sometimes, right?
Friend and almost a son.
Yeah,
right? It's really the surrogate father. I mean, obviously we have Tony right there, but there is that kind of it fits into that plot pattern, right? Of like, of course I will never leave you, dear father.
Yeah.
I think knowing Tony Weller, you know why he needs a surrogate father. Given who his biological father, he's got to have the surrogate father.
And I mean, of course, and I said it seems insane to say, no, I'll just stay and take care of you without money. Of course, this is something we wouldn't hesitate to do for like our parents or somebody who is who we have. I think it's just the way that we're conceptualizing it is you would never have that, relationship with an employer. But of course, as we're saying, the way this relationship is conceptualized goes beyond the kind of purely monetary remuneration here.
Yeah, as the novel started, like we find that he hasn't even seen his father in like a couple years or something, and when they run into each other towards the beginning of the novel, their first scene together. So Mr. Pickwick has certainly provided Sam with that. But I also want to make sure we notice that word humble, because that doesn't mean lack of too much pride. He's talking about station in life there, that humble friends are the friends that aren't even like, they're not the great people in the world, but the lower people. And that can also mean, socially lower as well. And they're not of the same social status, Mr. Pickwick and Sam Weller. And yet they can be friends. Now, albeit in a father-son, way, that's as close as they can be, but he is still using the word friends. So, now we jump to the little, and as the chapter title said, the little old man in a suit of snuff-colored clothes. What is snuff-colored clothes? Is that like a beige kind of, or like a light brown?
I'm assuming, yeah, somewhere
a
on
light brown, maybe.
I mean, I feel like snuff is it light? I feel like it's dark, but
Sounds like
That's
it would
what
be.
I thought.
Yeah.
Cool. It says a cool or yellowish brown, generally of a dark shade.
Yeah, yellowish brown, but dark.
That's not helping me. Yellowish and dark are conflicting here.
It's the color of snuff, damn it. But we don't see snuff anymore. But snuff's tobacco ground into a powder, so that's the color of it. It would be brownish, but it seems like it's a nasty look. That's a nasty way to color something. Snuff colored just seems gross. I guess because snuff goes up your nose, but
I mean, I know you have at the Rosenbach, you have Burns's pout snuff horn.
Yeah,
You
we have
can
a
go look
horn
and see
that-
if there's residue in there. See what
Yeah.
color it was.
You can still buy snuff. It still exists, but it's difficult to acquire, but it does still exist. It's a crazy way to put nicotine in your system, though. It really is. So, I mean, as a smoker, people think like, you smoke, that's crazy. It's not nearly as crazy as snorting it. They well, this man shows up, and this is Mr. Weller Sr., and he shows up to in secret meet Arabella and ask her about this marriage. And Mrs. Nathaniel Winkle, you are, who married the son of the old man at Birmingham, he says to her, and he's asking her, does it bother you and that you didn't get permission? And he's testing her out without revealing who he is, and she passes the test. She takes the blame for this, problem between the father and son. And then Winkle comes in, Nathaniel Winkle, the son, comes in and says, "Oh my gosh, this is my father." And then he gets the test. "Are you ashamed of yourself?" He asks him, his father asks him, and he says, "No, I am not ashamed of myself or of my wife either." That's the answer he was supposed to give, right? That's the test. He needs to make sure that, and I can't even put Mr. Winkle at fault here for this. It's like he hasn't seen his son in a long time. He really doesn't know who this girl is, or what their situation is, and he comes in and covertly tests them and gets the right answers, and immediately is right with it. Like, "Give me your hand, Nat," said the old gentleman in an altered voice. "Kiss me, my love. You are a very charming little daughter-in-law after all." And then they bring in Mr. Pickwick, and he says, "Mr. Pickwick, I thank you most heartily for all your kindness to my son. I am a hasty fellow, and when I saw you last, I was vexed and taken by surprise. I have judged for myself now, and am more than satisfied. Shall I make any more apologies, Mr. Pickwick?" Really apologizes, accepts it all, and it's really nice, and it reminds us of Pickwick's presence too. Pickwick is the god you need to go make your obeisance to after you change your mind or something goes along here. And then we get the incident with James. You mentioned earlier that Joe's what a pretty girl Mary is, isn't she? Joe says to Sam, and then he gets a kick. He led him by the collar to the corner, dismiss him with a harmless but ceremonious kick. That's what Sam gets for the audaciousness in commenting on Mary's looks. There you go. That's a great picture. It's like Sam's it's like the halfway's like lining up, like, "Kick me here."
It's a big target.
All righty. Well, we knew it would come. Chapter 57, 56 in the old serial edition, in which the Pickwick Club is finally dissolved and everything concluded to the satisfaction of everybody. Sam and Mr. Pickwick are secretly doing things and nobody knows what they're doing. Some of them think that maybe Mr. Pickwick is contemplating a marriage, and some maybe some distant tour. It'll take another author to do that, which I'll mention when we're finished here. And then they all have a big meeting and they bring everybody in a full circle to dinner. It's like the Pickwick intervention. Like, what's going on? Like, they bring him into the room. What's going on here? And we're all anxious to know, said Mr. Wardle, what we have done to offend you and to induce you to desert us and devote yourself to these solitary ones. It's like an intervention. Mr. Pickwick reveals that he is determined on retiring to some quiet, pretty neighborhood in the vicinity of London. We'll learn that it's Dulwich. And he has taken and furnished it and prepared its reception, and where I may yet live to spend many quiet years in peaceful retirement, cheered through life by the society of my friends and followed in death by their affectionate remembrance. This is where the novel really feels like it's written by a 25-year-old. Like, this is his vision of this. This is what would happen in like 30 years, right? Of course, Dickens works until he's dead. I mean, he dies young, but like Dickens never had any moment of thought, I think, that like he's ever not going to be writing a novel traveling doing something, very serious all the time. But he can envision Mr. Pickwick here retiring to this house, and that Emily and Snodgrass need to get married there as a way of kind of, christening the house. He says, "The happiness of young people," said Mr. Pickwick, a little moved, "has ever been the chief pleasure of my life." And then I have communicated both personally and by letter with the club, and he has occasioned its dissolution. The Pickwick Club exists no longer. That's it. No more Pickwick Club. Well, I'm in a Pickwick Club, so the Pickwick Club lives on forever. No one can dissolve all the Pickwick Clubs now. I'll get to a Pickwick Club letter. And I'll share it right now. When this novel is finished, in what year is it? Here's the letter. December of this year, he gets this letter. This letter's it was in the Susanette collection. Dickens receives this letter from William Hallison, and this is Dickens's response. "Sir, I have to acknowledge the receipt of your letter informing me of the institution of an Edinburgh Pickwick Club, and conveying to me from its members a most gratifying and welcome assurance of their goodwill and regard. I believe with you that this is the first society of the kind established north of the Tweed. So are there ones established south of the Tweed? Even by this point, are there already Pickwick clubs that Dickens has heard of in England? I cannot tell you how much delight it has afforded me to hear of its existence. All my relations by marriage are of Scotland. Many of my dearest living friends are natives of your fine city, and my most cherished recollections are of a dearly loved friend and companion who drew her first breath in Edinburgh and died beside me." He cannot stop talking about Mary Hogarth's death in his life. "Hey, did you ever visit Edinburgh?" "Oh, yes, I love it there. And I know someone who was born there who died, and I'll never forget." I mean, everything in his life. So, "Hey, did you ever read this book?" "Oh, I once gave that book to a young friend who died." He is obsessed with this. "I need not, I am sure, tell you that these are all reasons for endearing me to the place and everything savoring of it." Skip down here. "If a word of encouragement from me can, as you say, endow you with double life, you will be the most lively club in all the empire from this time. For every hearty wish that I could muster for your long continued welfare and prosperity is freely yours. Mr. Pickwick's heart is among you always." I love that. So the Pickwick Club is dissolved, but not dissolved, even in the time that he's writing this. There are already people meeting and saying they're in the Pickwick Clubs. So I was telling Kevin and Courtney earlier, Jacob and James, that in the Philadelphia Pickwick Club, and I wore my tie today too, my Pickwick Club tie.
Nice.
They you can't see any tie on me though with the beard. That I used to be Tom Smart because we all get a Pickwick name, and it has changed because they realized that the person who used to be Alfred Jingle long ago hasn't been with the club in many years. So we need an Alfred Jingle, so I get to be Alfred Jingle. I'm Alfred Jingle now in the club, though, which is awesome. So
is that a promotion or a
that's
demotion?
A promotion. That's a promotion for me. So.
But you're the villain now.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, Edward Hyde, right?
You buying your green outfits and everything? You prepared?
I'm definitely wearing my green tweeds to the next meeting.
And of course, I would kind of just jump in and say, I love that Joe Marsh has her little Pickwick Club in Little Women.
Yes,
yeah, all the Marsh sisters.
Yes. James, do you have a copy of the book with you right there? Are you reading this last chapter?
Right here?
You want to go to this last chapter? You want to read this little speech he gives right here? I shall never regret.
Which speech?
It's I shall never regret. It's right after he announces that the Pickwick Club is no longer.
"I shall never regret," said Mr. Pickwick in a low voice, I shall never regret having devoted the greater part of 2 years to mixing with different varieties and shades of human character, frivolous as my pursuit of novelty may have appeared to many. Nearly the whole of my previous life having been devoted to business and the pursuit of wealth, numerous scenes of which I had no previous conception have dawned upon me. I hope to the enlargement of my mind and the improvement of my understanding. If I have done but little good, I trust I have done less harm, and that none of my adventures will be other than a source of amusing and pleasant recollections to me and in the decline of life. God bless you all. With these words, Mr. Pickwick filled and drained a bumper with a trembling hand, and his eyes moistened as his friends rose with one accord and pledged him their hearts.
There we go. Thank you. Well read. His final speech. I mean, he gives, we get, does he give, is it actually his? No, because that's literally the final words that we get that are actual quote from him. We get everything else is, third person. The final speech of Mr. Pickwick. And that's like, and I felt like, the greater part of 2 years, that's been that's what he's talking about, the 20 months that have been going on in the Pickwick Club that we've also done. The reader gets to do this in this kind of real time. I meant to point out earlier at one point in this chapter, he's talking about the October time of year, which is where we're at reading it. He does the serial in real time, just as we've read it. And this is what we've got to do for 20 months to, mix with different varieties and shades of human character. And as frivolous as it's been, I hope it's also, led to the enlargement of our minds and the improvement of our understanding. And I think it does, and it does for me at least. And we'll have more on that as we finish this. Because now there's wedding preparations and everyone has to come on stage for the final, right? Like the Trundles, Wardle's mother, even the poor relations who were at the wedding, in Dingley Dell earlier in the novel when the Pickwickians first go there. Even the poor relations show up. Everyone has to make their appearance, and everyone is welcomed heartily, for riches or poverty had no influence on Mr. Pickwick. I mean, he's as it's ending, Dickens is really moving him towards sainthood. From this ridiculous, foolish character in the beginning to now, becoming this benevolent, helper of everyone and this kind of locus of joy, to now he's the saint of benevolence or something like that by the end. Sam is in the most unrivaled state of high spirits and excitement. Mary is glowing with beauty and smart ribbons. And they have the wedding, and then they come back to the house for the breakfast. And I won't read the whole thing, but it's everything was so beautiful. The lawn in front, the garden behind, the miniature conservatory, the dining room, the drawing room, the bedrooms, the smoking room, and above all the study, on and on and on. Ends with the carpets, the chairs, the sofas. Dickens loves lists. He loves giving us a long list of things, loves making those up. And the last glimpse we get of Mr. Pickwick is then him as in the midst of all this stood Mr. Pickwick, his countenance lighted up with smiles which the heart of no man, woman, or child could resist, himself the happiest of the group, shaking hands over and over again with the same people, and when his own hands were not so employed, rubbing them with pleasure, turning round in a different direction at every fresh expression of gratification or curiosity, and inspiring everybody with his looks of gladness and delight. And then the tears rolled down his cheeks in the fullness of his joy. Let us leave our old friend in one of those moments of unmixed happiness, of which, if we seek them, there are ever some to cheer our transitory existence here. There are dark shadows on the earth, but its lights are stronger in the contrast. Some men, like bats or owls, have better eyes for the darkness than for the light. We, who have no such optical powers, are better pleased to take our last parting look at the visionary companions of many solitary hours when the brief sunshine of the world is blazing full upon them. That, you know, that there are dark shadows on the earth, but its lights are stronger in the contrast. I mean, as on this rereading of it this time, like, and we keep getting endings. This is like the end of the Lord of the Rings movies, The Return of the King, where there's like 6 endings at the end of that film. There seems to be like he keeps ending it, and I have to then say this, and then I have to do this. But that for me is that's like where this book ends up with me. There are dark shadows, but its lights are stronger. And
I got to jump in to say, you know, it's funny you mentioned Lord of the Rings, because there's a passage where Haldir says, Mary says, I don't know if I ever would have left the Shire if I knew how things are, you know, and Haldir says, you know, not even to see Lothlorien, and the world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places, but still there is much that is fair. And though in all lands love is now mingled with grief, it grows perhaps the greater. And every time I read that, I think of this passage from Pickwick, which is so, I mean, James and the other Dickensians here, I mean, that this passage you just read is almost invariably crops up at some kind of gathering of Dickens' birthday or at a conference. People love reading that passage that you just read. And I think it really, you know, I can't believe that Tolkien didn't have that in mind when he wrote that passage in The Lord of the Rings.
He may have. I wonder. I haven't really explored much in Tolkien and how much he may have enjoyed Dickens, but it wouldn't surprise me. The Pickwick is the light in the darkness. I'll keep going with it. Like, you know, like I just it keeps moving on for me. Like now, yeah, that's what Pickwick is. He's the light in the darkness.
And they did become kind of godlike, but he did burst upon the scene in a blaze like the sun in the early pages. So it's sort of a return to the beginning, and you know, just like we had a big meeting, you know, at the end we got that too, you know, at the dinner. So there's a circularity to it. I think that you return to where you were.
But yet there's more, because now he's got to go down the rundown of what like the fate of all the characters. The Winkles are in a new house near him. The Snodgrasses go to Dingley Dell. Tupman.
No, it's unquestionably a bad custom that he has to do it.
Yeah. Yes, that's what he says in the beginning. But I'm going to tell you that anyway.
I'll do it anyway. Yeah.
All of Jane Austen's novels end like this too. They all end with a wrap up of like, oh, and then this is what happened to all this couple and that couple and the other couple. Tupman doesn't get married. Poor Tupman, right? Really? So now that's also valorizing marriage. Everybody has to get married. Nobody does. But in this world here that they're in, it's that does seem to be the thing that is, you know, you strive for. Now, Mr. Pickwick can rise above it because he represents something else. But Tupman wanted to get married, clearly. He has never proposed again. Sawyer and Ben Allen, East India. It says Mr. Bob Sawyer, having previously passed through the Gazette. What that means, people, is that watching is that he's bankrupt. He's been announced as a bankrupt in the paper, and now they go to Bengal with the East India Company. Mrs. Bardell is still, you know, letting lodgings to single gentlemen, but hasn't sued anybody for breach of promise. Dodson and Fogg are still in business. Sam kept his word and remained unmarried for 2 years. The old housekeeper dying at the end of that time, Mr. Pickwick promoted Mary to the situation on condition of her marrying Mr. Weller at once. Condition on this promotion, Mary, but she clearly wants to marry him. And then there are 2 sturdy little boys. Having been repeatedly seen at the gate of the back garden, there is reason to suppose that Sam has some family. I find it interesting that he throws Sam in there, and then we get Mr. Weller. Like, you think Sam would be the sum up, but or the end one. Mr. Weller drives for coach for 12 months, but his gout makes him retire, and now he lives in a public house. And then Mr. Pickwick continued to reside, employing his leisure hours in arranging the memoranda, which he afterwards presented to the secretary of the once famous club, and that's what we're reading. This is the posthumous papers that we're reading here of this. Everybody wants him to be godfather to their children. Jingle and Job Trotter become worthy members of the society where they are. Mr. Pickwick is somewhat infirm now, but he retains all his former juvenility of spirit and may still be frequently seen contemplating the pictures in the Dulwich Gallery. James, what is that? You sent me a picture of that too.
So the Dulwich Gallery, it's officially known as the Dulwich Picture Gallery. It was originally established because during the Napoleonic Wars, for a while, they thought that Poland was going to be a country again. And there it is. And so there were a couple of gentlemen who were hired to assemble an art collection worthy of a king, because they thought Poland's going to be a country again. The king's going to need beautiful art from all over Europe. And then that didn't work out. There was no Poland. And they had assembled
my poor ancestors in there.
Yeah.
Multiple, yes. Many
they had
got
to wait quite some time. Wait until after World War I before they finally get a country. And so these guys had bought up primo art all over Europe, and then they didn't have anybody to sell it to. So they ended up opening the Dulwich Picture Gallery. And so this is basically the original architecture. Some of it has been changed. I think those skylights at top were put on a little bit later. But it was built like during the Regency. So this would have been basically the building that Pickwick would have gone to. And it is in the south of London, in a fairly suburban feeling neighborhood. It's not like in central London or anything, but you go in and you're like, oh, they have that painting? They have that painting? Really? And I guess this is where Mr. Pickwick would have spent his time in his retirement, touring the Dulwich Picture Gallery and seeing this art from not necessarily all over the world, but at least from all over Europe.
Yeah, I know Ruskin went there quite a bit. There's some famous Murillo paintings. Yeah, they have a lot of, I think, kind of like Baroque, like 16th, 17th century art there. That Ruskin hated, like with a bizarre hatred of, and that he wrote about a lot. And just hated how dirty their feet were. Anyways, I don't want to get into like the weird Ruskin lore, but yes, it was I think one of the first like public picture galleries you could go to, because at this point most art is, as you said, this was being prepared for a king. Most art is sequestered away inside wealthy people's homes. Maybe you can see it if it's like a large estate and they, let people come in and tour and stuff. But again, most famous art is in private collections at this point. The public museum doesn't really exist yet. So this is an early place where you could go see these works. That, of course, even a man like like Mr. Pickwick wouldn't be able to acquire from himself, or the way that you would know things would actually be through prints mostly at this time. You would rarely get to see these in fact, because most of them are still privately owned.
Doesn't really seem like that juvenile spirited a pastime, but I guess if you're Pickwick, anything takes that energy.
Yeah. Thank you, Jane. That winds up being our last like annotation for the text too. So well done for pointing that out. I didn't have that. James sent me an email and I was like, "Ooh, great. Good. Let's talk about that." I was just going to pass by it. So I'm glad you pointed that one out.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Have you been there, James?
I have, and I've like you, Kevin, I've read this book many times, and this was the first time that it struck me as something because I had never been there before. And between my last reading of Pickwick Papers and this time, I was staying with a colleague because I was at a Dickens conference in London, and she lives in Clapham and was like, "Oh, you've never been to the Dulwich Picture Gallery? Just hop on the bus, take you right to Dulwich, and it's not one of the places that most tourists go. It's not the National Gallery or the National Portrait Gallery, but those pictures, as you said, they wouldn't have been available to the public at the time. And this
Yeah, I
was.
mean, I'm looking at their website. They have Rembrandt's, Gainsborough's,
Mhm.
Canaletto. I mean, this is heavy hitters.
All right. Well, thank you. Then we get the final sentence. Every year he repairs to a large family merrymaking at Mr. Wardle's. And on this, and I'm sure it's probably Christmas. On this, as on all other occasions, he is invariably attended by the faithful Sam, between whom and his master there exists a steady and reciprocal attachment, which nothing but death will terminate. It's interesting he throws death in there, like right at the very end. That's like an odd word to hear at the end of this book, death of, but it is not, but for Dickens, as he has been thinking since, May or April of death when Mary Hogarth died, I'm also not surprised that word kind of creeps out of his brain at the finish of this book. That's the whole thing. It is. I am. I got a little bit. We got some from Kevin and Courtney when we started this today, James and Jake. But what's your take? What's your take on reading this for 20 months? And did you keep up, or did you like not read in the months that you weren't on the show and all that? James, you go first.
Yeah, I did keep up. I think there were a couple times when I couldn't tune in on the actual Saturday, but I didn't like double up issues or anything, just sort of one installment each month. And it was nice to just be able to do this little bit and then go on and read other things and look at other things. And I appreciated the seasonality, as you've been pointing out, that when you read about autumn, that's when autumn is happening. And I can see why this style of publication was very attractive to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Jake?
Yeah, I read about the same way James did. I watched a lot of them in the week or so after they aired, but I always read for them. So I never combined months.
Yeah.
Although I wasn't always quite on our schedule.
Yeah.
I found this time that the biggest difference it made for me is that sometimes when I read this previously and read it straight through with my sort of whatever modern sensibilities, I would get frustrated at times by the interpolated tales or by the sort of tangents or by the sort of like, I'm just going to speed through this. I don't know who these characters are. Like, it doesn't seem like it matters. And something about this sort of the flip side of the forgetting that a couple of you were talking about earlier, right? Was this sense of like, oh, this is just like this is just what happens in this episode, right? I'm not, when you're reading them separately on the original schedule, there's no investment in continuity. And in fact, the lack of continuity almost is nice because it's like, oh, I don't have to figure it out. I can just listen to this weird guy's tale. And so it helped me understand differently the experience of these interpolations or these sort of side quest feeling plots as something that in a serial reading context, it wouldn't be, it's not disruptive. There's no disruption. There's nothing being disrupted.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought like the act of, because it's 20 months, that stuff's like, because now we do talk about like the point of the interpolated tales, but well, it doesn't seem like you'd even ask that question if you're reading it over 20 months. It's like, oh yeah, there was a little tale in this one. That's great. Yeah, and I said to them, I only doubled up in the last part. I read both parts last month, but I didn't even read them on the same day. Like it was like a week in between, or maybe even 2 weeks, when I read the finale, before, because I just had so much to prep, for everything that I'm doing with the different shows, that I needed to get it. I needed to get it out of the way before hit my Jekyll and Hyde show. So I had to at least finish it then. So I finished it a month earlier than I normally would have. But yeah, it's for me the biggest part is getting to live with these characters for 20 months. Normally I would have read this book and I would have read it in a month or maybe 2 months if I'm, because I'm reading so many other books at the same time. I would have read it in a couple months and it would have been a contained period of time. And it's just great to stretch it. To have a reason to be with Mr. Pickwick and Sam. Like, you shouldn't need a reason. You could just always just do this in your life. Just read Pickwick all the time if you want. But it's with so many things to read. I need to have reasons for it. I live by what seems pessimistic, but it's not, is the adage that for every book you read, that's another book you're not going to read, because we have a finite amount of time. Now, that sounds pessimistic, but what it does is it makes me only read things that I want to read. And that's important. It's important to don't waste your time reading stuff you don't want to read. Now, maybe you have to, like if you're still in school. But it's, I don't have to do that anymore. And it's nice to get to do that and to read what I want to read. And man, I do want to keep on with these characters. Now, Dickens kept on with them in the sense that in Master Humphrey's Clock, he brings back Sam and Mr. Weller and Pickwick. Master Humphrey's Clock, for those who don't know, it is Dickens finally, after, Pickwick and Twist and Nickleby, he said, that's it. I'm going to get off this cycle of just constantly having to pump out these stories every month. I'm going to edit my own magazine, Master Humphrey's Clock, and then I'll contribute to it as well. But other writers will. And it's a weekly magazine, but that's okay because I'm only just contributing. Well, nobody's really buying it because there's no Dickens novel serial in it. So he starts writing Old Curiosity Shop, and that becomes, and it's the Little Nell story. And so he does that, and it's weekly, and he has to come up with Little Nell weekly now. And then he follows that with Barnaby Rudge weekly. And so what had started as a project where I will just occasionally contribute and edit becomes an even tougher serial schedule for him.
Barnaby Rudge Weekly sounds like a difficult biblio-venture for us.
Yeah. Well, and that's got Grip in it, Grip the Raven. So I would love that. But yeah, that was a real hard thing. And then he takes a break, and that's when he goes to America and he kind of stops writing fiction for a year, or a little more than a year. But when it begins, he has these little sketches before the stories about this, Master Humphrey, and it's actually the old man who's in charge of Little Nell. The grandfather is the character, and these are just little things to come before and after the story. The framing devices to come before and after the stories, and he decides to bring back Mr. Pickwick and Sam, and where's the and Fizz even illustrates them. So here are the here are some of them. You see, here's Mr. Pickwick, and I love this pipe here, right? It's a Holland pipe here. Here's the old grandfather. I forget.
He's the grandfather's brother, if I recall.
The grandfather's
actually.
brother, yes.
Yeah.
That's what he is. I forget what they're talking about here, but this is, and then here's Mr. Pickwick meeting him out in the garden. Here's one of Tony Weller, and is this a little boy? I forget. I don't remember
That's Tony Weller's grandson. That's Sam's little boy.
There you go. So
who's already trying to smoke.
As Ed coughs.
I know. Start him with bubble pipes. That's what you start him with. So this existed. So there was some more from Dickens himself. There was some more Pickwick content, but it doesn't, like, if you go to it and think like, oh, I'm going to get more Mr. Pickwick, and it's not really. It's okay. Not the vibrant Pickwick and Sam and Tony that we get from from Pickwick Papers. I think too many years have passed. One of the people in the who's fun the show, Joe, has started reading, or is going to start reading, the GWM Reynolds had written his own sequel to this, because copyright laws are just like, or you could just do whatever you wanted basically with copyright. He had written his own sequel called Pickwick Abroad, or The Tour in France, very shortly after this ends. And he even does it in serial parts. And then it will be bound into editions after it's over. And here are this is what it looked like. Here's part 1, Pickwick Abroad, or A Tour in France, with 2 steel engravings by Alfred Croquill. Now, Alfred Croquill had already been doing Pickwick pictures called the Pictures Picked from Pickwick, I think. And they're even advertised in the Pickwick Advertiser in some issues. And some people would take those illustrations and add them, and they're even encouraged to in the advertisements, and add them to their own bound edition when they have their parts made. And so this goes on, and then this is published in book form, and it goes on to several editions over the years. I mean, people keep reading this as well as Pickwick Papers. People are reading Pickwick Abroad. Now, no one reads Pickwick Abroad. You have to find an old used copy. It's not currently in print by any publisher. But you can find online copies of it. I've never read it, and I'm wondering now if I would just start giving it a shot. And I wonder, there's even an account of someone online reading it who says they kind of really like it, almost, So I don't know what I'd be in store for with this, but there are other Pickwickian things out there for his original audience. Like, they never stop getting Pickwick. There's all kinds of stage. We shared these on one of the earlier episodes, all the Pickwick plays that were out at the time. So they don't get any interruption of Pickwick in their life. And Pickwick is all over the place for decades, and clearly through the 19th century. So
including into the 20th century when they made this. Tons and tons of this
figures. all the tobacco cards. I have facsimiles of all those. Pickwick continues. So, well, any final words from you guys before I give my final farewell? Thank you for joining. Thank you for doing all this with me. Thank you all so much for joining us for these 20 months. Pickwick Papers is still my favorite Dickens novel. And even after this reading, especially now, because of the joy it brings me when I read it, that Mr. Pickwick is that light in the darkness for me. I hope you also experience some of this joy. This has been some journey. We've had close to 50 hours now of content as we're, over 2.5 hours for this final show. Thank you to each of my co-hosts. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Courtney, James, Jake. This is and Max McGee, who filled in for 1 month. Max, thank you for filling in for that month and doing this with us. This is a novel about friends, and I hope we will always remain Pickwickian friends, my co-hosts, and everyone watching. James and Jake, hang on, because when I end, I usually end the thing, but I'm just going to end the stream, and I just want to talk with all you guys. I already told Kevin and Courtney this. You don't have to jump off when I end the stream. The normal business here, Pickwickians, thank you for joining us for numbers 19 and 20 of Pickwick Monthly. And remember, coming up next month, you can join me on our new monthly biblioventure, Sherlock Monthly, as we continue to discuss Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes adventures in the order they were published. We'll pick up with the adventure of the Norwood Builder. If you want to watch the previous Sherlock Mondays episodes, they're all available on our YouTube channel. And don't forget that our weekly Biblioventures Monsters and Ghosts will feature Dickens's A Christmas Carol. More Dickens for 6 episodes starting November 11th, 2024. Those air live on Monday evenings. That's Eastern Time. And if you miss them live, you can always catch up on the Rosenbach's YouTube channel. Or if you're watching this in the future, then they're there already on the Rosenbach's YouTube channel for you to watch. A lot of responses here at the end of this. This has been a wonderful ride. Many thanks to Ed and all the hosts. Many thanks for this wonderful experience. I will miss your smiling faces. Thank you so much. Cannot wait to see which novel you choose for next year, hoping for an Austen in honor of our anniversary. Maybe we'll do some Austen next year. I think they're probably just going to be courses, though, Janice. Joe says, Pickwick is a vibe. You want to remain with them. Well, Mr. Warwood said, it's a vibe. I agree, Joe. You can always catch up on our YouTube channel. Again, let me remind you to subscribe to our channel, to like these videos, and you can support the Rosenbach so we can keep doing these shows through donation. Your support helps us create more programs like this and care for our collections. You could also become a member. Membership gives you early access and discounts to programs and courses. You can find out more at our website. Kevin, Courtney, James, Jake, Max, who's not here, thank you so much for the last 20 months. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library. There are dark shadows on the earth, but its lights are stronger in the contrast. May you be one of those Pickwickian lights. Thank you, everyone. And I'll share the image again. And thank you and goodbye.